Sword of Coming Chapter 1235. Chapter 1235. Please invite a hidden official entering the lobby. Chen Pingon, who had been temporarily strengthened by Ning Yao, approached a chair without sitting down. He stretched out his hand and gently pressed the chair ring. Chao Gang was about to speak, but Scrofulariaceae preempted him, and he roughly explained the reason to Lord Yinguan. Song Gaoyuan couldn't help but laugh, and suddenly felt that he had returned to his summer palace. But one thing must be admitted, they felt relaxed once the young hidden official came. Chen Pingon listened to the general plan and suddenly smiled and said, "This matter, in comparison, is a confusing account. It can be said that I have wronged you, or I can say that I have not wronged you. Because it was me who cut Wang Jia with the sword before." A worshipper of the mountain, she heard Wang Jia and His Majesty the Emperor of the Jinpu dynasty drinking a little wine and chatting a few words that were not particularly pleasant. She is not particularly good-tempered, and now she is the most popular person on Luolu Mountain. The identity of the worshipper is the most precious thing, so I couldn't hold it back and secretly handed him a sword, which led to today's misunderstanding. Chao Gun finally found an opportunity and said with a smile, "Look at this, it's us who have caused trouble for Lord Yinguan." No matter how bad-tempered Scrofulariaceae she was, she couldn't say such indiscriminate flattery, so she had to change her way of speaking. "We have to thank Senior Shujuan for allowing us to meet Lord Yinguan." Song Gaoyuan looked around, feeling like he was back there again in a trance, and familiar faces appeared in his mind. The Ascension Realm monk was still nailed to the wall, with his back to everyone, and his face and expression could not be seen clearly. Ning Yao knows Chen Pingon very well. Since he has said so much, it means that he is far from the point of resolving the past feud, otherwise he would have asked himself to withdraw the 12-sword energy that penetrated Wang Jia's natal energy palace. Xie Songhua was doubly puzzled and asked in her heart, "Ning Yao has become so good at fighting. Is he extra strong because he is the best in the world?" I remember the last time we saw each other, Ning Yao was still a sword cultivator in the nascent Soul Realm. Although the news about Ascension City and the colorful world was known to everyone on the top of the mountain, Ning Yao broke the mirror all the way and finally became a legitimate world sword cultivator as an Ascension Realm sword cultivator. First person. Song Pin put his fingers together, crossed his shoulders, gently pressed against the scabbard of the long sword Fuyao behind his back, and replied, "It's hard to say." She was actually the first sword cultivator to sense the existence of Ning Yao. Thanks to her sword, which was connected to the destiny of Fuyao continent, the situation was mysterious, and it was a bit like a mutually overwhelming relationship. Only monks in the Ascension Realm can talk about the strong and the weak. The so-called weak Ascension is Nan Guangzhou, who was first suppressed and beaten by Taoist Nin in Yuanyangzu in the Confucian Temple, and then had his head chopped off by the executioner Hao Su at the door of his house. Best example. As for strong Ascension, it can actually be subdivided into two types. As long as a swordsman reaches the Ascension Realm, it will definitely be a strong Ascension. This has been the case for thousands of years without exception. The second type, such as Ai Aizhou Wei Shi, who was a master in building roads in his early years and left behind many Qi practitioners of his generation, Xiao Tianlai from the Tianchi Mansion in Longhu Mountain, and the Fire Dragon Master from Padi Peak, and this they are in the Ascension Realm and have a very meaningful reputation. They are called candidates for the 14th realm. Of course, Chen Chunan, the mellow scholar from Nan Posu Island who carries the sun and moon on his shoulders, is also included in this list. Above Nanzhuang, below Long Hushan Tianchi and the others, those in the middle, such as Du Mao and Sun Yuan in Tonggishao, Wanyan Laojing in Jinjiazu, etc., are the more ordinary Ascended Realm Qi practitioners. Not weak, but extremely strong. There is still a clear distance between them and the Fire Dragon Master. And this Viazu Xinqing with the Taoist name Su Jun is of course of the same generation as Nan Guangzhou. Chen Pingan knows more inside information than Xie Songhua and the others. Nan Guangzhao's Ascension realm is actually not as weak as you think. If he fights with Nan Taoist, he will definitely lose, but if he really fights hard, Nan Guangzhao won't lose so miserably. In addition, Hao Su specially prepared a series of killer tricks for Nan Guangzhao. It is really unbelievable that a veteran in the Ascension realm was beheaded while sitting in his own dojo. This allowed Nan Guangzhao to solidify his reputation as a weak Ascension. It's just that the dead man can't explain anything. The killing power is as high as an Ascension realm sword cultivator. It is not difficult to defeat an Ascension realm chi practitioner, but it is actually very difficult to kill someone in the Ascension realm. Chen Pingan put his hands in his sleeves, lying on the chair ring, and said with a smile, "Fellow Shujuan, there is no need to hide your clumsiness. It's hard for you to pretend, and it's hard for us to pretend not to know. Since we are all smart people, let's not hide our clumsiness. You treat the other party as a fool." After hearing the words, Wang Jia seemed to weigh the pros and cons for a moment, and then came up with an idea. He used some magical power to turn his body into nothingness. In the dangerous situation where his true body, Yin Shen and Yang Shen were all nailed by the sword energy, he still having an extra body, he was able to turn around and face more than a dozen sword cultivators. This person has the appearance of a middle-aged man, wearing a golden crown on his head, decorated with more than 2,000 orbs. There are more than a dozen jade trees standing on the top of the trees, with a pocket golden crow entrenched on the top of each tree. Wang Jia looked calm and said, "Now that the misunderstanding has been explained clearly, why don't we just stop here?" Born in the lower class of the market, he did not engage in production and only called friends. He had a heroic spirit and great ambitions at a young age. According to legend, when Wang Jia was born, a passing sorcerer saw that his hut was full of royal aura, and told his parents that this son would be a noble person in the future, with the appearance of an emperor. Chen Pingan smiled and asked, "If I don't stop, what can you do?" Wang Jia smiled and said, "I don't dare to kill, so what's the point of just restraining me like this?" However, Chen Pingan didn't answer the question, and said slowly, "I heard from my worshipper earlier that Taoist friend Shujuan had determined that I would become the great lead national preceptor, and even more swore that the day I succeeded the imperial preceptor would be the beginning of the decline of the great Li dynasty. Just because I have a soft heart with a fierce look and a soft heart, I can certainly deal with the chi practitioners on the mountain with ease, but I don't dare to go to war with any country south of Dadu and start provocations at the border at will, because I don't want to see the death of people and dead people at the foot of the mountain. From that moment on, the Great Wall of Sword Chi will implicate the Great Li Iron Cavalry and turn them into trash." "I did." Wang Jia admitted the matter openly, nodded and said, "Since Lord Yin Guan dares to admit that it was his family's sword that wounded people, I just watched from a distance and said a few words. I don't dare to admit it." Song Pin frowned, and Pu he asked in his heart, "Is this really the case?" They, the foreign sword cultivators who emerged from the pile of dead people, have long been accustomed to the deployment of troops and generals in the Summer Palace, and the layout of the battlefield, and they really have never thought about such a thing. Situ Jiuk said with a gloomy face, "Damn it, if we keep talking like this, there seems to be no chance of hacking him to death." Chen Pingan suddenly stood up straight, put his hands on his hands and smiled, "Fellow Taoist Shujuan, then you are my confidant. This matter has really troubled my Taoist heart for a long time." Wang Jia was stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting him to come like this, but he quickly came back to his senses. Wang Jia looked out of the lobby and said to himself, "I am Fuyao Island, a great river and mountain, a place of great beauty, a land of golden powder, all turned into ashes. I was a chi practitioner in the immortal realm at that time. I had to avoid a destined military disaster in order to have any hope of attaining enlightenment and ascending to heaven. Naturally, I couldn't accomplish the most proud feat in the world. Of course, I couldn't imitate the old master's cross-continental rescue. The reason? Of course it's because I don't want to die and earn a false reputation that will be scattered and no one will remember it after 100 years. Afraid of death and avoid fighting, so what? What can you do to me? To put it bluntly, who is not the Fuyao continent king, eh? Now that I have escaped from prison, I have ascended. Kill me. You hermit officer Chen Pingon, do you really think that you are a lonely criminal officer Haosu? Can you just leave? Are you willing to give up that lonely mountain? Are you willing to give up that green mountain? Pingjian sect. Are you willing to continue the fading cultural heritage? You don't dare to kill me, how dare Ning Yao? He, the number one person in the colorful world, a terrible title, an enviable state. If I guessed correctly, Ning Yao is already in the 14th realm, right? As a result, when he comes to Fuyao continent, he will have to clash with Song Pin's sword Fuyao continent. Ning Yao can just wait and see if he can do it again in the future. I have rushed to the vast world several times with my sword, and I will be able to linger for a few days in the future. Pooh, he snorted, this guy is so shameless and arrogant, no wonder he can ascend to the Ascension realm, but he lacks Taoism, so he does not rise but falls, falling to the nascent soul realm. Song Pin suddenly said, the debt for killing Wang Jia is on my head. I can shoulder the responsibility for the investigation by the Confucian temple afterwards. The reason is also simple. He is in the Ascension realm and wants to become the leader of an immortal master in a continent, and I need to relying on the sword Fuyao to absorb and refine a continent's luck is a life and death struggle for the Great Road. As for the numerology and the like, I don't care. I can't control it anyway. Lord Yin Guan and Ning Yao, you are responsible for it. CS Songhua said, count me in and help Song Pin share the expenses, but I won't go to Gongdalan to drink tea, so Ning Yao must agree to send me to hide in colorful world. Wang Jia shook his head and laughed angrily, you two ladies are out of your mind. Are you determined to kill me? What are you planning on doing? Yu looked indifferent and said, we, the sword cultivators, don't engage in disputes of will, so why bother crossing the upside-down mountain? Pooh, he gave a thumbs up, you old boy, you have never done anything great in your life, but this is the only thing you said openly, and I am convinced. If I can't help scolding you in the future, you can talk back. Wang Jia took out a picture scroll with a white jade scroll head from his sleeve, hung it in front of him, and slowly unrolled it. It was a picture of a fairy mountain with green mountains and rivers. In the picture scroll, the mountain road is winding, and a mustard seed-sized visitor to the mountain visits the fairy. There was an endless stream. Wang Jia put his fingers together, and twisted the figures in the scroll, like peanuts, put them into his mouth and chewed them slowly, greatly replenishing his Daoxing, and was continuously injured by Ning Yao's sword energy. His Tao Qi is gradually approaching perfection. Wang Jia, who regained his radiance, smiled and said, I know you are not trying to scare people, you can really do it, but unfortunately you made a miscalculation. Do you think this young hidden official will allow you to pay such a high price? Then he will. It's not Chen Pingon anymore. Song Pin was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. He was about to unsheath the Fuyao sword behind his back, but Chen Pingon pulled his hand out of his sleeve, pressed it twice, and instantly pushed the long sword back into its sheath. Wang Jia burped and put away the fairy mountain painting with great history. Today's misunderstanding, you may wish to think carefully about what I did after I walked out of the mansion and came to this lobby. Could it be that Chen Pingon is because of after hearing a few harsh words, and at most some dirty thoughts that were seen through by Chao Gun, Chen Pingon dared to kill a local ascendant who was in the world without permission? Then he was not a close disciple of the Wen Xing lineage. How can I put it bluntly so that you can understand the truth? Even though King A of the Ascension realm of Fuyao continent has done nothing to help Fuyao continent, he is neither wrong nor too awe-inspiring. To be honest, I admire you sword cultivators, but I don't think you are any better than you except that your killing power is high enough. I've already talked about it by opening the skylight and speaking frankly, so I'm going to tell you one more thing frankly. In fact, I am also a sword cultivator. I will not go to the Great Wall of Sword Chi. Ning Yao turned around and looked at Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan seemed to be deep in thought for some reason. So she didn't draw her sword. Even if Wang Jia revealed his background and admitted that he was a sword cultivator. But now Ning Yao can even kill the 14th realm candidate ghost. It's easier to kill a sword cultivator who has just reached the Ascension realm. No matter what kind of candidate you are for the 14th realm, even if you are only 1.5 steps away from the real 14th realm, there is still a huge gap. If you have never been in this place yourself, you will not know the mystery and magic of this place. Suffice it to say about vision. For example, when an ordinary person in the human world looks up at the moon, it is hazy. When he becomes a Qi practitioner, he can vaguely see the mountains and mountains in the middle of the moon. When he comes to the gods on land, when the weather is clear and the weather is clear, with all his eyesight, he can occasionally see the outline of the palace. After reaching the upper 5 realms, if you hold your breath for a moment and look intently, there will be no change in the moon phase, and there will no longer be the difference between a string and a full moon. When you reach enlightenment, you will look up and see a huge hanging moon as if it is very close at hand, within your reach. And, in the middle of the month, the old palaces and mountains undulated, every detail appeared. But once you join the Tao and become a monk in the 14th realm, there will be an extra path in the world that is exclusive to you. Dream interpreters can see the billions of dreams in the world. If the road involves marriage, you can see countless red lines hanging empty. Chen Pingan's eyes shone brightly, and Ling Buting asked from the bottom of his heart, "Fellow Taoist Shujuan, are you familiar with Tian Wan of Beipingzu, Lu Miao of Beiju Luzhou, and Han Yushu of Tongisao? Have you ever done business together?" Wang Jia didn't even bother to talk to him, he was just talking about nothing. Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Shujuan, if you say you are a sword cultivator, does that mean you are a sword cultivator? Is there such a good thing in the world? Then if I had met you earlier, why would I have to suffer so much in the Sword Chi Great Wall prison to become a sword cultivator?" Wang Jiagong wanted to speak. Chen Pingan waved his hand, "It's just asking for what you want, cheating, and bluffing. Who can't do it? Brother confidant, I am an old man in the world. In terms of rich experience in the world, Song Gaoyuan and several young people together are not as good as him." Ning Yao, who seemed to have been keeping his eyes closed, lowered his gaze and quickly rolled his eyes. Chao Gun and Scrofulariaceae looked at each other. How could this boy Song Gaoyuan be so virtuous? His name could appear before several. But the fresh nickname of bosom friend brother is indeed quite nice. If Wang Xinshui is here, he must say something fair, and Yin Guan will know if he is there as soon as he takes action. It stands to reason that if the discussion of thoughts and deeds on the mountain and down the mountain involves right and wrong, merit and demerit, it seems that it has never been really cleared up since ancient times. When I was walking alone in the world, I once heard someone talk about a relatively reluctant person. The truth is, it doesn't matter whether it was merit or sin in the past, but it depends on whether it is right or wrong in the present. After a moment of silence, Chen Pingan subconsciously reached out and patted the chair ring, thought for a while, shifted his gaze slightly, looked toward Situ Jiu and Pu He, and asked with a smile, after hearing these sincere words from Taoist Master Shujuan, "Are you right? I feel angry in my heart, but if I put myself in the situation again, it seems reasonable. At most, he is just a real villain, not a vicious person." Situ Jiu nodded. The truth is this, but even if Wang Jia is not killed today, this disciple and grandson of Taoist friend Su Jun will go down the mountain to travel in the future, so take it easy. Pu He pressed his palms against each other, rubbed his hands continuously, and said, "Understanding is understanding. Itchy hands are even more itchy." Chen Pingan looked at Chao Gun and the three of them again. "So this game is very careful and the heat is very good, because it is specifically targeted at smart people. The effect Wang Jia wants is unreasonable, but reasonable. Without the presence of the two-sword immortals Xie Songhua and Song Pin, Wang Jia might not have been able to do this, because you are smart. After all, the level of the golden elixir is over there, and your swordsmanship is still not high enough." Hearing this, Chao Gun asked, "Is this Wang Jia deliberately seeking death?" Scrofulariace said doubtfully, "Even if we fall into his trap and get angry, we use our swords together to kill an immortal. Of course, it's not difficult at all. Killing an ascendant is still difficult." Song Gaoyuan said, "Of course it is difficult, but there is no chance at all." Xie Songhua handed over the first sword, Song Pin's Fuyao followed up, plus Pu He and the others. "There is at least a glimmer of a chance." Chen Pingan nodded and said, "That's right. What Wang Jia wants is this little possibility, so that he can continue to accumulate a result that makes you willing to hand over the sword with all your strength. If Ning Yao doesn't show up, he still has more provocations, interlocking with each other. On the surface, it looks like giving in, but in fact, it leads you by the nose. If you accidentally injure one or two Jindan sword cultivators in the house, especially if the fighting here affects the children elsewhere, both parties will not die. It's endless. Wang Jia's purpose of this trip has finally been achieved at this moment. He is not a swordsman. The reason why he said this is probably because he saw something was wrong and felt that the Yingguan Lord in the Summer Palace who was lucky enough to achieve unparalleled achievements was really well-deserved, broad-minded, and magnanimous, and he had a lot to do with it. Ancient style, compared to some young people who have no hair on their lips and are not able to do things well. Ning Yao coughed when he heard this. Remind someone that it is rare for you to meet again after a long separation. Chen Pingan had no choice but to put away some of his natal magical powers that he didn't use easily. He had no choice but to meet Chao Gun and several others. He always felt like he was in a summer palace. He couldn't help it, and it became a natural habit. In short, Wang Jia is deliberately trying to annoy me, Ning Yao, and you. It's possible for him. I'm just saying it's possible. He's not in the Ascension realm. He's just a pseudo-realm that can be fake. Right, confidant brother? Wang Jia shook his head when he heard this and sneered, "You are talking nonsense, nonsense. Mr. Chen, do you want me to sacrifice my flying sword?" Chao Gun said with a smile, "Brother Zhiji, why are you so anxious? If you are a sword cultivator, you are a sword cultivator. There is no one in this room who is not a sword cultivator." Scrofulariace ruined the situation and said, "Chao Gun, you are troubled by this local accent. You are not harsh at all when you curse." Song Gaoyuan said with a smile, "It's not a curse, it's just that I'm following the example of Lord Yingguan. Unfortunately, my talent and skill are not enough. I haven't learned the true essence, and I am missing several meters of door gods." Ning Yao rubbed his eyebrows. If he had known better, he would not have stopped Chen Pingan. Although she still had the status of a hidden official in Feishing City, she had never been to the Summer Palace where Chen Pingan was stationed. Even if she had heard about the customs there in the early years, it was not as good as seeing it with her own eyes and hearing it today. Chen Pingan walked around the chair, wrapped his hands around his sleeves, and began to pace, muttering to himself, "I once visited the Lu family of the Yin and Yang family in the divine continent of Middle-earth. I felt like old friends at the first sight, and we had a great conversation. It was like passing by. Don't miss it." I asked Lu Shen a more critical question. Well, it was the head of the Lu family whose name was Tianbian. I asked him whether the birth of this mineral vein in Fuyazhou was the result of the barbaric Wenhai left behind. The backup man in the human world, Lu Daoyu, is much more kind than his confidant brother. He knows everything and talks about it without hesitation. He did not hesitate to spend a lot of time and energy to do a fortune-telling in seclusion for this purpose. Of course, it may also be because I was accompanied by 2 ascendants. Because of the Jingjian cultivator's sacrifice, he was in a hurry to leave. Anyway, when Lu Daoyu came out of seclusion, he was depressed and said that your Fuyao Island was extremely chaotic because of the relationship between Bai Yi and the 8 thrones with his sword. Because the mountains and rivers were broken everywhere, the geographical location was also poor. There were many variables, and extraneous things all over the place caused him to lose 100 years of Taoism. He could only deduce a very vague fact. Even if it was really the foreshadowing of Chuanzhou Mountain by Manhuang Wenhai, it would not be harmful to anyone. As for it, whether it is good or bad, he has not yet made a conclusion. This is too general to say, and it is like not saying anything. How can a partial fact be qualified to talk about the truth? Based on my dual status as a Yin official and a close disciple of the Wenxing lineage, I can browse the archives of the Summer Palace and the Confucian Temple Merit Forest at will. Thanks to another Lu Taoist friend, I dare to say that my understanding of the Ascension Realm is better than it's more thorough and comprehensive than the Ascension Realm. Chen Pingan paused for a moment, then turned to look at the fake sword cultivator and the fake Ascension Master who was clinging to the wall. Wang Jia, you have to rely on the Sword Immortal to hand you the sword to help you escape from disaster and truly reach the realm of ascension. Wang Jia was silent. After all, words are useless. The green-shirted guest in front of him, who had come from afar, was far superior to Chao Gun in terms of his realm, vision, and the city's scheming. For the far-sighted Manhuang Wenhai, the mineral vein of Fuyao continent has nothing more than 2 functions. One is to reach the north of Dadu in Aquarius continent, so that the Manhuang monster clan can advance from both ends and kill separately. Beiju Luzhou and Luxiazu, slowly chewing the hard nut of the former, but Luxiazu, the latter, is a piece of paper, and the difficulty is much lower than that of Fuyazu and Jinjiazu. This jade vein with amazing reserves can make Zhu Yan. It makes sense to relocate beasts like him to Jinjia continent, whether it is to reward them according to their merits, to divide them among several barbaric military tents that control the Western Front, or to build a bridge across the sea. The second one is to plot against my husband who is from the 3 continents of Hedao. Of course, what he really wants to plot the most is me, Qin Pingan, and Ning Yao from the colorful world. Since he wants to hide the truth, he needs a borrowed knife to kill someone. To kill someone with a borrowed knife, he needs a good sword. In Fuyao continent, hiding an Ascension Realm monster who has to personally join the game and come to Chuanzhou Mountain is too eye-catching. You may not be able to escape the investigation of the Confucian Temple and the discernment and deductions of the Yin-Yang family. A local immortal who is timid and afraid of death is just right. Before meeting you, I did have dozens of ideas, but how can I deduce and calculate them on the chessboard? Even if Lu Ji, Xiago, and Lu Su are included, they can secretly send back the information to Luopa Mountain. Didn't think you could make it happen. But the moment I saw you, I suddenly understood. Because you want to use your troops to break through the military calamity, and when you are able to escape the calamity and enter the Ascension Realm, that is when the mineral veins are pulled to open the formation, and an Ascension Realm chi practitioner loses his mind and goes crazy and does not hesitate to self-destruct, which can lead to half of the mountains and rivers of a continent were shattered and the land sank. Fortunately for Chao Gun and the others, they had seen the world in their summer palace. Several Earth Immortal sword cultivators in the room who had never been to the Great Wall of Sword Chi had chills running down their spines as they listened to the young hermit official's understatement. Wang Jia smiled bitterly and said, "If you want to impose a crime, why bother?" Chen Pingan sneered, "You know what's the biggest problem with smart people, whether they are average smart people who can deceive fools, or pedantic people who are extremely smart and can deceive all smart people? It is that every time we do something whatever you ask for, don't let it go to waste. Wang Jia sighed, Qin Pingan, the truth you said is beyond belief. I'm afraid of you. Whether you believe it or not, I want to make it clear to you that there are no such messy calculations. I admit that I am not a swordsman, and as you expected, I need external force to forcibly dismantle the army to survive the last of the three calamities in my destiny, the tribulation of a continent, the destruction of the mountain gate, and the dissolution of my own army. Xie Songhua and the arrival of Song Pin really made me overjoyed. I even deliberately called His Majesty the Emperor of the Jin Pu dynasty. I did it deliberately. Even if I didn't get slashed by the worshipper from Luopa Mountain, I would have my own means to fight with Chao Gun and the others. Conflict. Damn it, just relying on Qin Pingan's eloquent rhetoric, I am afraid that even if I am not hacked to death by Ning Yao's sword, or by Xie Songhua and the others' random swords, I will definitely have to go to Gondlan to eat in prison tomorrow. I have to admit that if I were not myself, I would have to believe it to a certain extent if I were an observer. This guy Qin Pingan has such a dirty heart. No wonder he could be the last hidden official of the Sword Qi Great Wall because he underestimated him too much. Wang Jia is really scared. If he doesn't be honest, there is a high probability that he will not be able to survive the disaster today and will die. He found Qin Pingan looking at him with a pitiful look. Then Qin Pingan asked a strange question, Wang Jia, Yu Pu may know that he is himself. Does the immortal Yu Pu really do the same? Wang Jia was horrified, as if he had guessed the most terrifying situation in hindsight. His eyes were filled with pleading, as if he was saying, Yin Guan, save me. In fact, Qin Pingan has already sacrificed his natal flying sword, bird in the cage. Every step from the door of the lobby to crossing the threshold, even reaching out to touch the chair ring, and every gentle tap, are all moving the 5 elements of natal objects. In Chuanzhou Mountain, there was a mixed bag of genealogy monks and Shanzhou wild cultivators, as well as ordinary people who came here to try their luck and do some small business. The former were all thrown out of the mountain, and the latter were all moved away. The two groups were far away from Chuanzhou Mountain. A very far boundary, either falling to the ground like dumplings, or changing its standing position out of thin air. During this period, there were also some earthly immortals who used their methods and refused to move. They would be gone once a flying sword was pressed between their eyebrows. They didn't dare to take the trouble of sending the gift from the sword immortal out of the country, so they ran away in a hurry. After all, the harsh words and a few reminders from the sword immortal rang out in everyone's heart. How dare you steal money and territory from me? Are you all tired of living? Are you able to wade into troubled waters to fish in the battle between ascension realms? When you meet at the top of the mountain, don't forget to take the mortal master with you to hang in the air. If you have a talisman boat, use it. Remember not to touch the ground with both feet. You can run as far as you can. Who dares to miss anyone? Ordinary master, I will kill an earth immortal when I get back to make up for my life. There are not enough golden core yuanying earth immortals, so I will use the middle 5 realms below the earth immortals to make up for it. Chao Gun, Xie Songhua, and the others, as well as all the sword cultivators inside and outside the house, had left the boundary of Chuanzhou Mountain in an instant. Together, they helped those Qi practitioners and ordinary masters stay as far away from Chuanzhou Mountain as possible. In the lobby, only Qin Pingan and Ning Yao were left. And that fellow Taoist Su Jun who is at the bottleneck of the immortal realm. Qin Pingan said, to be precise, you are dismembering a corpse and then becoming a dead soldier. In this conspiracy, there is another indispensable key link. There must be a big demon who can guess the intentions of careful unintentional and cooperate with it skillfully. I said it as soon as I walked in. They are all smart people. Don't bother hiding them. Why bother coming? Right, Jiazi Zhangguangxiang who is proficient in refining things. Or the brother Shouqin who is as famous as me. Why did you two hook up because of their flirtation? Why don't you become a Taoist couple? Don't worry, it'll make up for the money from the red envelope next time I'm a guest in the wilderness again. Wang Jia was out of control, his lips moved slightly, and an old man's hearty voice sounded, as expected of Nan Shou Chen Bei Yin Guan, Shou Chen sword immortal, and I worked so hard here, we still can't hurt Yin Guan at all. Sure enough, Yin Guan can be hurt at all. The only ones who fall into disrepute are those who are hidden officials. Another warm voice sounded in Wang Jiao's mouth, how about it? I've said it a long time ago, you shouldn't be greedy for big things, you can make a little bit. Someone else chimed in, Sir Yin Guan, I'm here too. This is a rare opportunity. Can we talk a little more? Brother Chen, I have a Taoist companion now, so why don't we exchange gifts? Chen Pingon turned a deaf ear to these noisy, reminiscing about the past, put his hands in his sleeves, and said with a smile, since we are all gathered together, I guess Xiao Sun is right next to us. Xiao Sun laughed as expected over there and said, Girl Ning, I'm doing pretty well here now. The third highest throne, how about I kill a useless person who joins the fun? Ascension Realm, I'll treat it as a gift to you too. Money? Ning Yao didn't say anything. The eyes of that Wang Jia regained their clarity, as if they had returned to their true colors. He looked at the green shirt and shook his head, as if to say, forget it, the matter is over, there is no need to save me. It turned out that Chen Pingon reminded Ning Yao with his heart, and quietly handed out a small sword to help him. He then used the flying sword Jinko Yu to clear the way, and at the same time used the bird in the cage to cut out a small isolated world. Only in this way did he find the true location of Wang Jiao's mind. In the shortest possible time, he learned some of the monk's past, and at the same time tried to save the real Wang Jia. He used various methods and extremely fast movements to suppress the small world of the human body with a series of talismans. Now that Ning Yao is present and she has reached the 14th realm, Shou Chen, who is the mastermind of this matter, is too lazy to do anything more. He just blows up the real body of Wang Jia, the yin, yang, and soul. The more insidious method is to show Chen has sword energy entrenched in an inconspicuous chi palace where Wang Jia's soul is. Even if Chen Pingon can borrow a few big talismans to reverse a small period of time in one fell swoop, it will only make Wang Jia, who seems to be back to normal, even more tormented. That's all. The scene of Wang Jia's true body falling apart was like a tree blossoming and falling. Before Ning Yao handed out a sword. His lips moved slightly, and there was a look of relief in his eyes. He and the green shirt murmured. Ning Yao sheathed his sword, hesitated for a moment, and asked, What did he say to you when he was dying? Chen Pingon said, 2 sentences, one is it has nothing to do with you, no need to feel guilty. Ning Yao waited for a while and asked, any more words? Chen Pingon was a little helpless and gave the answer in 8 words. Ning Yao nodded. Chen Pingon was silent for a long time, then remembered something, raised his hand and rubbed his cheek vigorously, and said, Actually, I made many guesses, but Shou Chen and Guan Xiang are not smart enough to withstand deceit. I am sure that Wang Jia became the most critical basis for pulling strings. Do you know what it is? Ning Yao shook his head, I can't guess. Chen Pingon said, if you want to fight with Wang Jia, there must be a reason. Ning Yao said, what reason is this? Chen Pingon walked to the door of the lobby, crossed the threshold, sat on the steps outside, took out the scarlet gourd, shook the wine bottle, and asked with a chuckle, I'm very curious, how can you retain your strength? Ning Yao sat aside, you are not very good at guessing other people's thoughts. You seem to have a catchphrase, guess. Chen Pingon raised his head and took a sip of wine, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, narrowed his eyes and smiled, with you by my side, I am too lazy to use my brain. Ning Yao said, do you still remember that I entered the 14th realm and came here and saw your first avatar? What does it mean? Chen Pingon said, the pseudonym is old. The Zhuji sect Kai Yushan is only a few steps away from Xingyang Mountain. He is greedy, angry, stupid, slow and suspicious. Ningyao raised his eyebrows, but he wasn't angry. She thought it was a way to control her anger. That's why Ningyao showed up here and was willing to stop. Since he guessed wrong and it was a mistake, Ningyao just pretended that it didn't happen. From the corner of Chen Pingan's eyes, he could see the lovely expression of his beloved woman. She guessed wrong, but also right. Gently shake the wine bottle. Chen Pingan always felt that there seemed to be two contradictory words written on every wine bottle in the world. Booze. Stop drinking. Chen Pingan raised his head and took a swig of wine. It seemed that if he wanted to stop drinking, it was very simple, just drink the wine in the pot. In late spring, the grass grows and the orioles fly. Just now someone wanted the blue-shirt swordsman to do something. Please invite a hidden official to kill the barbarians. Sword of Coming Chapter 1236. Chapter 1236 How should we practice swordsmanship? Alaiha River winds into the sea and flows endlessly. Thousands of spring mountains are displayed on the screen, and strange peaks easily rise by the water's edge. Chen Pingan informed Chao Gun that they could return to the Feng Shui cave mansion. The outside world is still happily speculating on which two ascended monks are fighting. Since they were expelled from the country by the domineering old swordsman among them, they were destined not to get a share of the pie, so they had to find some fun to relieve their boredom. It was guessed that the person they had with was the Ascension Realm sword cultivator, who was most likely from Liuxia continent. Jing Hao, the Tai Bao of Qing Palace, is the immortal Jing Lao. While waiting for others, Ningyao asked, the Lu family of the Yinyang family in Middle-earth, helped deduce the good and bad fortune of the mineral vein. Chen Pingan laughed and said, I made it up. At that time, he did bring Xiao Mo and Xiago as guests of the Lu family, but Lu Shen was an old fox. How could he choose to sacrifice his own merit and conduct to make wedding clothes for others at the critical moment when the founder of the three religions was about to leave his path? As for whether Lu Shen is in harmony now, it's hard to say. Yin-yang and the five elements are an extremely broad avenue. Whether it is height or width, it is better than the way of articles and poems. Zozi talks about the sky, and Lu talks about the earth. Zozi has already reached the 14th realm, and Lu Shen is following behind. It's too strange. That time when Chen Pingan returned to Haoran from the outside world, his first choice was Sishiantai of the Lu family. The head of the family, Lu Shen, who came out of Jilan office, was indeed forbearing in everything. The Xia dog, the second seat of my family, was so lively that it didn't make Lu Shen really angry. More than 20 sword cultivators came hand in hand, and Chen Pingan briefly told them the inside story of Wang Jia being plotted by the minister and Guan Xiang. Since he is standing with Ningyao, Chen Pingan can speak freely and calls Zhou Mi by his first name. Chao Gun and the others spent about half a year in Chuanzhou Mountain, and the matter was finally over. Chen Pingan clasped his fists, and smiled and thanked the 7 outsiders, immortal sword cultivators, but the content of his words was very inconsistent with the mountain genealogy. Since we are all sword cultivators, I will not say polite words to you other than sword cultivators. I would like to thank you all, and we will have enough wine in Luopa Mountain when we travel to Aquarius continent in the future. An old nascent soul realm swordsman straightened his back, his face flushed, but he couldn't help but be polite. Actually, I don't do anything serious, so I can't afford to be so grateful to Lord Yinguan. Chen Pingan smiled and said, you are doing a life-threatening job of tying your head to the waistband of your pants, and you still can't deserve a few light words of thanks from Qin. If the senior said this on the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he would be looking for a drink. CS Songhua spoke to Song Pin from the bottom of her heart. Previously, when I was selected, I had to choose the right one. Otherwise, you would have looked like this. I met the protagonist of a certain landscape travel book in the wilderness. What should you do? Song Pin said calmly. In turn, teach him some tricks in the room. CS Songhua realized in hindsight, Ning Yao can't hear our thoughts, can he? Song Pin said, if you don't name me, she probably won't hear you. It's hard to say anything now. CS Songhua raised her eyebrows at Ning Yao, then raised her chin towards Chen Pingon. You too? When? Don't you want to learn the swordsmanship of Lord Yinguan? The sexual between the souls of the Taoist couples on the mountain is no better than the sexual between men and women at the foot of the mountain. There is a huge difference between those who understand and those who do not understand. Ning Yao had no choice but to pretend to turn a blind eye. Chen Pingon asked them to go sit inside the house first, saying that he still had to wait for someone. A scholar with a young appearance arrived, a Confucian gentleman. Hanging on his waist was a jade pendant made by the Confucian temple. The inscription was a famous saying of a sage: if you don't embellish your long or short, and exhaust yourself with love, you can be called a straight man. He should be an academy figure secretly dispatched by the Chinese Confucian temple and fully responsible for the Chuanzhou mountain matter. When Chen Pingon saw the inscription on the jade pendant, he smiled a little more. He must be a straight man, who is a gentleman. If you are in charge of a Confucian temple, you should at least let this person be in charge of a Confucian academy. The Confucian gentleman bowed and saluted. Luoyuan Academy is highly sophisticated. I have met Mr. Chen. Chen Pingon smiled and bowed in return. Chen Pingon from Luola Mountain has seen the heights of mountains. Scholars such as Gao Xuandu, a great gentleman from Luoyuan Academy in Fuyezhou, and Wen Yu from Tianmu Academy, were all young Confucian scholars who rose up during that war. Gao Xuandu just exchanged pleasantries and went straight to the subject where his duties lay, asking Chen Pingon about the cause of the strange phenomenon in Chuanzhou Mountain. Chen Pingon took out 2 objects from his sleeves and hung them in the air in front of him. They were 2 relics of good quality left by Wang Jia, a golden crown and a scroll. Gao Xuandu asked doubtfully, this is it? Chen Pingon said, for example, the founder of Doqing, the Void Lord Wang Jia, was ambushed and killed by the savage sword cultivator and the great demon official Xiang in his early years. Wang Jia relied on an ancient secret method to survive with difficulty, adhering to a little bit of true spirit. Finally, with the ghost immortal attitude, he reappeared, took over the general affairs of the city, and kept the ancestral hall alive. Now that he has perfected his external skills, he begged Song Pin and CS Songhua to hand over their swords to help him escape the disaster. Gao Xuandu just glanced at Chen Pingon and said with a smile, okay, I understand. I will write 2 letters immediately to report the truth to Luoyuan Academy and Zhongtu Confucian Temple. I will personally visit Ruda City to talk to them. Explain this. It was really vigorous and resolute, not sloppy at all. Just being a deputy mountain leader is a humiliation. Chen Pingon pushed the golden crown and scroll to Gao Xuandu. Since it's on the way, I'll ask Chief Gao Shan to hand it over to the Ruda City Ancestral Master Hall. Gao Xuandu put the 2 things in his sleeves, hesitated for a moment, and invited with a smile. Among the 72 academies, our Luoyuan Academy has always paid more attention to military strategy. Can you invite Mr. Chen to give a lecture? As for the topic of the class, Chen sir, you can make your own. Chen Pingon nodded and smiled. I will definitely go if I have the chance. Without thinking, Gao Xuandu said without hesitation, would like to ask, is Mr. Chen's opportunity in the last few days or within half a year? If Mr. Chen has been busy with affairs recently and cannot get away for the time being, it will be even later. It doesn't hurt to have some, next year or the year after that. But I kindly ask Mr. Chen to give a rough range. The time error should be within 6 months. Luoyuan Academy should give corresponding detailed arrangements. Mr. Chen is very knowledgeable and knowledgeable. This kind of thing can certainly be done with ease, and it can be done on the spot, and there may be no need to prepare a draft. We at Luoyuan Academy attach great importance to this precious opportunity. From the number of Confucian students attending the class, whether it is necessary to establish a selection mechanism, their screening and consultation of questions, control, etc., we will make detailed adjustments based on Mr. Chen's lecture date. Chen Pingan liked this, "You're welcome very much." After thinking for a moment, he went through the planned itinerary and said, "Then it will be tentatively scheduled for the end of next year. If there is an advance or delay, I will inform Luoyuan Academy in advance." Chao Gun said in his heart, "The shadow of the famous tree is indeed as rumored, and the high degree of mystery is indeed true. Lord Ingguan is better. Is this a good match?" The old Scrofulariaceae said, "You and I are not really strong rivals." According to the evaluation method developed by Guozhuzhou, Gao Shanchang belongs to the likes of Song Gaoyuan and Deng Liang at most. Song Gaoyuan rubbed his eyebrows. "We entered the summer palace together. I'm just not as good as you guys. I flatter you so much, so I have to be ostracized by you like this." Chen Pingan asked a key question: have the Confucian Temple and the Academy concluded the ownership of this mineral vein? Gao Xuandu shook his head and just gave his own guess: either a virtuous person can live here, be able to convince the public, not cause trouble, and make the already crumbling mountains and rivers of Fuyazhou become precarious. On the contrary, it can make the mountains and rivers of Fuyazhou becoming stable. I believe that the Confucian Temple is willing to stand by and watch the results. But if such a popular figure does not appear, this vein may be used to repair the broken mountains and rivers of a continent. Of course, the Jinpu dynasty will receive certain compensation. Chen Pingan asked curiously, "Have you ever estimated the overall value of jade reserves?" Gao Xuandu said, "Currently there is only a rough estimate. The specific amount converted into fairy money is the Academy's top secret and should not be disclosed. I can only say that the result I came to Chuanjiao Mountain for on-site inspection is enough to support a building. Ordinary sects, without any income, spend thousands of people and thousands of years. To be precise, it is assumed that a certain Qi practitioner in the lower fifth realm, by chance, occupied Chuanjiao Mountain. From the time he founded the sect to the founding the sect, after this, will have 1,000 years of prosperity." Chen Pingan asked, "What is ordinary?" Gao Xuandu replied, "What I mean by ordinary is to have a founding master who is expected to achieve enlightenment and ascend 2 to 3 Yupu realms, and more than 100 middle and fifth realm Qi practitioners, including more than 20 Kaifeng practitioners. There are about 900 cultivators in the lower 5 realms." Because neither party used the voiceover method in the conversation, Xia Songhua was speechless and couldn't help but ask, "Is this considered ordinary?" Gao Xuandu said, "Of course it is considered a first-class sect now, and it is only one step away from the top. Thousands of years later, this may not be the case. After all, the vacancy vacated by a member of the 15th realm cannot be filled by a few more new 14th realms." Gao Xuandu suddenly asked, "Mr. Qin?" Chen Pingan laughed dumbly. Because he guessed what the other person was thinking. Since the Confucian Temple is tentatively declared an ownerless property of this jade vein, who can take it or not? Instead of leaving it to those sneaky people behind the scenes, it would be better for you, Shanzhu Qin, to do an upright according to law. At least I, Gao Xuandu, at Fuyazhou Luoyuan Academy, am willing to help and say a few words of justice. As long as Luopa Mountain has a good relationship with the Jinpu dynasty, the only one left is the Chinese Confucian Temple? Are the current academy scholars too generous? When you was like this? He went beyond the rules and went directly across the border to Fengdu to arrest the culprit. Ning Yao turned his head and looked somewhere and reminded, either show up or stay away. Chen Pingan followed Ning Yao's gaze and thought about it. The appearance of the other party was indeed reasonable and not too unexpected. As time goes by, the higher you climb, the more people you know. The woman with a sword and a white skirt and mask has an ethereal spirit. She is the future White Emperor city warrior who is willing to follow Jing Juzhong, the female ghost sword fairy, Jing Dan. She was taught the swordsmanship of the Yunnu lineage, and she was one of Zhou Shenji, one of the 10 people in the Middle-earth divine continent in the past, and the Tsuching lineage of the old swordsman. Both of them were well-deserved big masters of swordsmanship, and the most outstanding swordsmanship in the world in the past. It's just that compared to Zhou Shenji, the swordsmanship inheritance of Yunnu's line has always accepted women but not men. Although there is no particularity that it must be passed down to a single line, it is indeed incomparable in terms of number of people compared to the luxuriant branches of Qing's line. After thinking about it for a while, Puhi felt that this girl looked familiar. It's just that there was a lot of makeup and powder that I couldn't remember at the moment. After thinking about it, I finally remembered that there was a lifelike painted mural on the wall of the dojo of the founder of my sect, which seemed to be the woman carrying the sword in front of me. Shui Zhou admired from the bottom of his heart, "Wow, this female ghost sister is so beautiful. She is different from Song Jianxian." After Jing Dan appeared, she stood upright, her voice was cold. "I just received a message from Mr. Jing's flying sword. He has exchanged his merits with the Chinese Confucian temple for this mineral vein and ordered me to cut it into 3 with one blow, one of which was donated to Liuyuan Academy free of charge to make up for the lack of Fuyezhou's geographical location. One copy serves as the basis for Gu Kan to choose the site in Chuanjiao Mountain and establish the sect. The last share is left to the local qi refiners of Fuyao Continent to take for themselves. As for whether they will use the method of genealogy, intrigues, and show off their magical powers, the small fish will drive out the shrimps, and then be driven out by the big fish, or they will use the wild road repair method to tear their faces apart. A big fight, a fight to the death, the sect leader Gu Kan, and I will not care, let alone take responsibility. I scattered a lot of money on the ground with good intentions, and there is no reason to care about the person who picks up the money. It is a rule. It's still irregular. Anyway, after going around and around, it all ends up in the money bag of Fuyezhou. If you have any objections to Liuyuan Academy and Gao Shanzhang, you can go to the gate of Baidi City to argue with me. Of course, as for the content after the 2 words is not Mr. Zheng's words, but my own opinion. Not because Baidi Qing and Jing Juzhong were involved in this matter, Gao Xuandu decided to act as appropriate. He still said solemnly, "I will verify this matter with the Zhongta Confucian Temple and Liuyuan Academy. As long as it is confirmed, Gukan will if you create a sect in the Chuanjiao mountain area and divide this jade vein into 3, I believe there will be no problem." Jing Dan said, "Mr. Jinggaoi, he told me in the letter that if Liuyuan Academy cannot cut and refine the jade mines and fill the gap in the geographical location of the continent, I can do it for you. As long as you think it is suitable, I will stay here for more than a month. Time, cooperate with Liuyuan Academy." Gao Xuandu nodded and said, "Then let Sword Immortal Lao help." Jing Dan couldn't help but glance at the Confucian scholar. Are today's scholars much thicker-skinned? Gao Xuandu turned to look at the green shirt, and Chen Pingan smiled and said, "I am not the owner of this Feng Shui cave. I expelled everyone before, it was a last resort. In fact, both Senior Zhang and Zhang are guests. Where Senior wants to settle down, just discuss it with Liuyuan Academy, I am not qualified to dictate." Jing Dan looked at Ning Yao, who was both a junior in Dao and a senior in swordsmanship, with a rare smile, and said softly, "Mr. Jing changed the topic at the end of the letter and did not mention me by name. Whose surname is it? The letter only said that if someone is willing to accept this gift as a gift to celebrate the landing of Ascension City, then all the previous decisions can be invalidated, and this person can be allowed to move the mind to the colorful world. Let me use my sword to open the door and guard it for a while, using my little strength. Ning Yao said, Senior, please help me say thank you to Mr. Zhang. She hesitated for a moment. I will take a small piece of jade myself and treat it as a congratulatory gift from Mr. Zhang. During the next meeting of the Feishing City Patriarch Hall, I will report this and record it in the book. Jing Dan smiled even more when he heard this, and he had some good feelings. There is always no reason to explain. Maybe it was because he saw someone who was similar to himself that Jing Dan felt so close to him. Yu Yu and Situ Jiu looked at each other and smiled. Ning Yao was not as unreasonable and had his own way as rumored. Scrofulariace smiled and said, if Lord Yin Guan takes action, he will definitely cut off a large piece of jade, make a chair, and place it generously in the Patriarch's Hall of Feishing City. In this way, the heat is a bit too high, or not it's okay. It's most likely to be placed in the Summer Palace. In this way, Mr. Zheng will be regarded as an anonymous guest of the hidden official lineage. From now on, when passing through the colorful world, he should be a guest no matter what. After that, Jing Dan said goodbye and found a quiet mansion by the Feng Shui Cave River to stay, waiting for the next news from Liuyuan Academy. The person she formed a contract with, Gao Yi, a sword cultivator in the Jade Pu realm, has already terminated the contract. However, they are still traveling together across continents this time, and Jing Dan still has some trivial matters that need to be settled. Previously, Gao Yi chased all the way to the Great Wall of Sword Qi and caused trouble for Wei Yudian of the Sword Sect. In fact, it was just a superficial reason. There was also a deeper reason. Jing Dan promised that he could get 1 or 2 sword veins as long as he was at the Great Wall of Sword Qi. She recognized that by inheriting the legacy of the Sword Immortal from the Great Sword Qi Wall, Jing Dan could help him fight for the Big Road. Her implication was that Gao Yi was not stupid, and he was a Jade Pure Realm Sword Immortal who was no more than 2 decades old. One of the youngest sect leaders in the history of Liuxia continent, he is still very smart. Knowing her thoughts, she plans to support him as the first person on Liuxia Continent Mountain, replacing the Qinggong Mountain Thorns and Artemisia. But when they arrived at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, everything went wrong. First, they didn't even see Wei Yudian's face, and then they met a strange girl in a mink hat on the road. The series of events that followed caught Gao Jianxian even more unprepared, causing Sect Master Gao to come here with great ambitions. In the end, he did not even go to the top of the city to try his luck and seek an opportunity. Of course, Gao Yi was not willing to end in such a sad ending and returned to Haoran's hometown in despair. Then Jing Dan gave the reason, saying that if the last hidden official does not recognize you here, it means that the entire Sword Qi Great Wall does not recognize you, so don't be wishful thinking and make people laugh. If you insist on climbing to the top of the city, you will only bring shame to her as a protector. Gao Yi sat in the water pavilion, with bamboo curtains hanging on 3 sides, sitting opposite her, leaving one side open to the plum blossom trees. As soon as you step into the water pavilion, you will find that this place has a unique cave, and the scenery is completely different from the Feng Shui cave in the underground cave. Jing Dan changed into a woman's attire, and her sword hung on the pavilion pillar. There was an unidentified maid with a bun who was making wine. On the table, the wine was bright green in color and the cup was floating with purple lightning. Jing Dan occasionally leaves Gao Yi's mind. She never tires of fine food and fine food. All the utensils used for cooking wine are old items from wealthy families in ancient times. Jing Dan is indeed a very elegant woman. Outside the waterside pavilion, the mountains are green and pavilion-like, and large plum blossoms are as gorgeous as the sea. Jing Dan is holding a fan in his hand. The clouds are frosty and snowy, and the breeze fills his sleeves. Gao Yi glanced at the ugly winemaking maid, always feeling that she was out of place in this world. I remember that Jing Dan called her Huansha maidservant. The maidservant is also like a wooden person without any emotions or desires and any sense of consciousness. Gao Yi sighed and asked cautiously, "You were just invited to be the keeper of Baidi City, and you don't have a pedigree identity. Do you really think you don't register your name with my sect and hang the portrait of Patriarch Kaishan in the Patriarch Hole?" Looking through the history of Hauran, which founder of the immortal mansion of Zita didn't have a few wonderful and mysterious stories, and didn't meet a few high-ranking scholars and strangers with obscure backgrounds. Jingha's Qinggong Mountain has it, and of course the Shaanxi sword sect also has it. Jing Dan said with an indifferent expression, "There is no banquet in the world that never comes to an end. When fate comes, it gathers and then breaks up. This is the law of nature. You, Gao Yi, are in the jade purity realm of establishing a sect, so you don't have to act like a woman." Although the two parties have temporarily terminated the contract and did not wait for you to move out of the house and get promoted in the daytime, the benefits that should be given to you have not been missed at all. You have actually withdrawn the future income in advance. There are no hidden dangers, so don't take advantage and act like a good boy. The ruins of the ancient cave in Liuxia continent emerged at the right time. Jinghao and Xu Nanyuan, who were determined to win, have all decided to quit. Jinghao, in particular, invested a lot in the early stage, and all the hard work and planning were in vain. You are a small person. Xiaoyupu realm, being able to seize this place from the hands of two Ascension realm people, what else can they not be satisfied with? If we talk about the blessed land, there is still the possibility of poor management, which makes it useless. This kind of cave can be used as it is. On this trip together, I deliberately showed up many times and handed the sword to others twice, just to make some people with evil hearts dare not take action against you easily. But you have to know what is going on here. Wait for me to go. If you go to Baidi City to serve as Mr. Jing's interrogator, you and I will be fine. If you encounter obstacles that you can't overcome in the future, you can go to Baidi City and kowtow to try and see if I will pay you any attention. Xu Nanyuan, the master of Tianyu Cave, had just entered the Ascension realm not long ago. As a result, Liuxia continent now has two Ascension realm masters taking charge of the mountains and rivers. What really made Jing Hao and Xu Nanyuan give up and willingly give up a cave ruins was not that Jing Dan was in the Ascension realm with them, or her swordsmanship and master's biography, but that Jing Dan took the initiative to reveal the secret, and she was about to rush to the sealed cave. Baidi City in the mountains, serving as the gatekeeper. Otherwise, once the Ascension realm monks are at odds with each other, overt and covert methods will emerge one after another. Apart from swordsmanship, Jing Dan thinks that he cannot compare with the two local gangsters who are deeply rooted in Liuxia continent. So the only person they were really afraid of was Xing Juzhong. Gao Yi said helplessly, "I understand. Once we say goodbye, we become strangers." After all, the two parties have formed a contract and have been dependent on each other for many years. Jing Dan has watched Gao Yi step by step from a young boy to today. She is still willing to give you a few more words. I have already taken you to meet Ding Fai and got to know the relationship between you and Wei Yudian. It's a fate, and Ding Fai has personally admitted that you are the reincarnation of the sword immortal Bing Jia, and Wei Yudian's natal flying sword Xiaofeng is indeed a relic of your predecessor. When you were young, you had many seemingly inexplicable grievances and disputes with Wei Yudian. There is a correct answer. From now on, you don't have to tangle too much with Shaanxi sword sect and Fenzhou Weisher. As for Wei Yudian herself and her flying sword, since you have made a gentleman's agreement with Ding Fai, a real man should do things. You should also keep your promises. Gao Yi nodded, and according to the agreement, Wei Yudian owed him a duel. Anyway, the time and place were decided by her, and he didn't bully her because she was just nascent soul now. Gao Yi looked depressed. He just couldn't figure out whether the man named Qin was acting too domineeringly if he insisted on interfering with such a situation, which made sect leader Gao panic. Xing Dan said, Fan Kushanding Fae is kind enough. With his sword Jianjin and flying sword Jia Xin, plus he is also a descendant of the ancient Jin lineage. If he really wants to target you, Gao Yi, had no chance to grow up and died suddenly a long time ago. It was because Ding Fai wanted to mediate and help you too, so that you could solve the karma of the past life with good karma in this life. Gao Yi said, with you here, if Ding Fai really dares to use spells to harm me, it's hard to say who will die suddenly. Xing Dan said earnestly, Gao Yi, listen to my advice. Without me to protect you secretly, if you are always so petty, no matter how many opportunities you have to acquire foreign objects, it will be difficult for you to achieve great things. It only takes one wrong move, and you will be dead. There is no recovery. The maid leaned forward, holding her sleeve with one hand, and pouring a refill for Gao Yi with the other hand. Gao Yi drank quietly, not forgetting to say thank you to the maid, and she smiled. But Xing Dan angrily scolded her, young lady Huansha, how dare you be charming? The maid smiled and said, those who have truly forgotten their home country regard other countries as their hometown. Why should they vent their anger on others? Xing Dan spoke sharply and was about to reprimand the Huansha maid, but the maid seemed to speak for her, slapped 10 times to set an example. Xing Dan still wanted to say something, but the maid helped and said, foolish children bring harm to the country and the people, and it is not a pity to die. The maid slowly poured Xing Dan a refill of wine and said with a smile, I'll just shut up. Xing Dan sneered and said, why? Because of my disconnection with the merchant Mr. Fan, do you think that he will be able to reach the 14th realm in the near future, or are you sure that I will not dare to kill you? The ugly maid turned a deaf ear and instead looked at Gao Yi and said with a smile, Sect Master Gao, you don't know something. The founder of Shangxi Sword Sect, Hua Furong, was the master of Wei Yudian. She used to be a frequent visitor to Ning Mansion on the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Ning and Yao, the two sword immortals, looked at each other irresistibly. As Hua Furong's most valued and beloved direct disciple, Wei Yudian, it was precisely because of such a deep love forged by her seniors that had Ding let her go to the Great Sword Qi Wall to escape. Get out of the limelight. So Sect Master Gao was at the Great Wall of Sword Qi to cause trouble for Wei Yudian, but he chose the location not very well. It seems that he accidentally bumped into the young Yin official, but in fact it was all part of Master Ding's plan. Fortunately, Sect Master Gao met Qin Yingguan instead of Qin Yingguan's Taoist companion. To be honest, he is no longer an ordinary man of great fortune and fortune. Gao Yi was speechless and still frightened. Xing Dan rarely interrupted the Huansha maidservant. When the latter filled Gao Yi's glass of wine again, Xing Dan sneered and said, being a good sect master is more difficult than becoming a Jade Pu realm by luck. Double that. If Gao Jianxian dares to underestimate anyone in the upper 5th realm, it is estimated that Liuxia continent will soon have another short-lived sect. Gao Yi raised his wine glass with both hands, raised it with the two seniors, humbly said, I've been taught, and drank it all in one gulp. The Huansha maid stood up, stretched out her hand to lift a corner of the curtain, and murmured, in the time of chaos and chaos, in a peaceful world, all the men and women on the road are going out to look at flowers. Xing Dan smiled happily and said, you and I are both ghosts, but we haven't been able to get any further. Being beaten first by Su Junjie is really worth drinking 3 glasses of wine. Maid Huansha sighed quietly, the transformation between dragon and snake between wood and wild geese is not so easy to achieve. At the top of the feng shui cave that was carved into the wall of his private residence, Chen Pingan said goodbye to Gao Xuandu and returned to the lobby with Ning Yao. He glanced at the seats that seemed to be facing each other, waved his sleeves, and the chairs formed a circle. Chen Pingan randomly picked a chair near the door. Chao Gun took off his boots and sat cross-legged. Scrofulariaceae slumped on the chair. Song Gaoyuan still sat upright as usual. At that time, the summer palace had only a small desk with piles of archives and documents, and there were futons, bamboo chairs and small benches. Depending on their hobbies, Dong could only have a few, so he would often take a nap against the small chair in his precious spare time, with his legs placed on the desk. Guizijia's state of mind is not high, but she is in high spirits. Her rest is to wipe the small bamboo box on the table with her sleeves, breathe into the bamboo box, and rub it repeatedly. Gu Jianlong likes to lie on the ground with his head under the table. Lin Junbai likes to play music alone, while Peng Yuanji is used to being in a daze, with a grimace on his face. Luo Zhini always deliberately did not look at anyone. Wang Xinshui often asked Yin Guan whether his shoulders were sore and whether he was too tired, while praising Mi Dajiangxian for his outstanding military exploits. Chen Pingan took out several kinds of Xianzhou wine and dozens of pots from nearby objects, and pushed them to the center of the lobby for everyone to help themselves. Pu He, who was well off, followed suit, and in an instant there were dozens of bottles of wine on the ground. Ning Yao thought for a while, then stood up and left. Xie Songhua and Song Pin also walked out of the lobby. When Ning Yao left, Scrofulariaceae came to Chen Pingan with lightning speed. Chao Gun's skill was not weaker than that of Scrofulariaceae, so he sat next to Chen Pingan, one on the left and the other on the right. Chen Pingan was holding the wine flask and simply sat on the ground. He and Song Gaoyuan, who was opposite him, raised the flask high and drank a big gulp of wine from each other. At the same time, he complained that Song Gaoyuan didn't understand etiquette. As a half-host of the sect in Fuyao Island, don't mention 3 in a row. Chen Pingan reached out and grabbed the arms of the 2 people beside him, tightened his strength slightly, and said with a smile, "I miss you so much." Ning Yao and the others started walking outside the house, and Xie Songhua said with a smile, "We all know the basics. You don't have to deliberately give this little face to Master Yingguan." The 7 who have never been to the Sword Qi Great Wall have long admired Chen Pingan. It's amazing. After what happened today, I am even more impressed with my admiration, and you don't lack this little face. Ning Yao said helplessly, "I'm here, but he can't drink." Song Pin smiled and said, "I heard that Situ Jiangxian's family is recognized as a nest of beauties." Ning Yao said, "Not long ago, there was a girl named Wang Gua who visited Luopa Mountain with the sect. Chen Pingan met her and gave her some advice. He said this himself." Xie Songhua clicked her tongue and said, "Master Yingguan did not attack himself. He has truly reached the level of proficiency and perfection." Song Pin said, "Isn't it true that there is no 300 taels of silver here?" Lu Su came a little later and entered the lobby where the aroma of wine was fragrant. "Pu," he shouted, "everyone should make room quickly. Talented scholar Lu is here." Although Lu Su was usually a boring gourd who never spoke his mouth, when he cursed Pu He, when he opened his mouth, it was mixed with a bunch of elegant words, from Beiju Luzhou, which was really a curse. Yu Yu hurriedly pretended to break up the fight, feeling relieved. Pu He didn't think much of Yu Yu and Situ Jiyu, but he admired Lu Su very much, the young master of Luomahi who didn't have to pretend to be poor and everyone thought he was poor. The old swordsman thought if he had a Taoist companion, and he has another son, who is almost like Lu Su. It's a good thing I didn't hear this honest statement, Lu Su. During this reunion, they hardly talked about the Great Wall of Sword Qi. They mostly talked about Howren's general situation in the world, the customs, and anecdotes from various continents. Of course, it is also because of those boys and girls that they will talk about the youngest generation of genius sword cultivators in the world who are famous. This cannot avoid Qinli. Qin Pingan just learned that Qinli has reached the bottleneck of the Jindan realm and is about to retreat. He may not be rushing to break through the realm, but there are signs that the bottleneck is loosening. Qin Pingan didn't mean to take Qinli's hint that they should not slack off in sword practice. Instead, he wanted them to travel more to each other and meet up to travel across continents. Qinli, a disciple of Duqui Jinhu Li Kai, is known as the Little Hidden Official. Before Qinli was taken away from his hometown by Li Kai, he made a special trip to the second shopkeeper's wine shop and wrote a "nothing" sign. Qinli, the sword is dim and the flying sword is sleeping. The 100-year-old swordsman is at your fingertips. You must know that the sword immortal of the Great Wall of Sword Qi is not in the Jade Pure realm. This means that if Qinli wants to achieve this feat, this young swordsman who has become a golden elixir in the world and is a first-level secret elixir must first strive to become a Jade Pu within the age of Jiazi Dao, and then give him in the remaining 30 or 40 years of his life. He cultivated Yupa's foundation and became a fairy in one fell swoop. If others are full and holding on, they will have to compare the bot with each other. Since Qinli himself said that it is easy to get, he must become an immortal realm sword cultivator at the age of 70 or 80, so that Qinli is not bragging. Draft. Qinli is also the common imaginary enemy of Seshu Nodu and his peers. Even Bai Xian, who says, "I'm not afraid when the King of Heaven comes, because I am the King of Heaven." In Jing Daifeng's words, this kid is extremely talented. If he practices Taitu Kung Fu for one day, he will have the skills that others have been practicing for a year. But Bai Xian occasionally mentioned Qinli, with a hint of guilt in avoiding his sharpness. I must add that Qinli is several years older than me. Of course, for Chao Gun and Scrofulariaceae, there was a little hermit official Qinli. They, the seniors who stayed in the summer palace, just said with emotion, "My way will not decline, and my future generations will be formidable." A few of the teenagers were drunk to no avail, but Seshu and the others, on the other hand, the more they drank, the more they felt that drinks were nothing. Lu Su and the earthly immortal sword cultivators gathered together and punched each other several times. Pu he didn't know when he was sitting shoulder to shoulder with Yu Yu. He put his arms around the latter's neck and hit his old friend on the head hard. He said, "You are a waste. How did I make such a friend like you? In fact, I was even more so. Back then, I will lose to Mi Xiuhua." Qin Pingan was already looking for a drink. He said that there is a secret way of reading that is not passed down, which is called stealing in the middle of the night and killing people in the back alleys. Young Yin Guan, perhaps not that young Yin Guan, was really drunk. He also said that he was very happy to meet you all on this day, this month, in this place and in this situation. He even said that sword cultivators like us should have this intention and dare to think like this. Everyone encourages us. The old way of swordsmanship in the world ends with me, and the new way of swordsmanship in the world begins with me. He finally said that I am not drunk, and that you are incapable of drinking, and you are not even good at persuading someone to drink. He burped with wine, and Hao Qi Qianyun stretched out his arm to push it away. With his drunken eyes, he turned around and saw that it was her, and he really sobered up. Seeing this scene, the whole audience burst into laughter. Ning Yao was helpless. It was indeed a rare opportunity, so she sat down to drink with Xie Songhua and Song Pin. It was considered as a second drinking party. Chen Pingan sat alone on the steps outside the house, with his hands in his sleeves, lost in thought. At some point, He Xiangting and Yu Qingzhang came outside the house. The two sword cultivators left their hometown and chose to leave Luopa Mountain when they arrived at Luopa Mountain. They sat next to the earliest Master Yinguan, later Master Chao, and the last Master Qin Shan. Chen Pingan came back to his senses, smiled and reached out to hold their heads, rubbed them gently, then put his hands on his knees. His eyes were gentle, and he said nothing. Sword of Coming Chapter 1237. Chapter 1237 How Can the Realm Be Even? The sword-worshipping platform at Luolu Mountain in Bay of Pingzu, the peaks of Qingping Sword Sect in Tonggishao, plus Hexiangting and Yuqingzhang where Yu Yu and his disciples settled in Lixiaozu. If you add in the young girls who were taken away from the Sword Qi Great Wall earlier by Xie Songhua, the group of sword immortals. Life gathers and disperses involuntarily, and everything in the east, west, north, and south is like a ping. The 9 sword cultivators who followed Qin Pingan and left the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Master Chao, who was nicknamed Chao Mo at that time, took them out of the broken cave in the Hosta and met them in a small boat on the sea. Only Bai Xian and Na Lan Jade was in the cave mansion realm. Now Bai Xian is in the Dragon Gate realm, and King Sun Chun, who is the most diligent in practicing swordsmanship and has the most determined mind, is also in the Guanhai realm. After all, they have only been in Haoran for a short period of time, and nearly half of the children have not yet entered the middle 5 realms. For example, among them is Yao Xiaoyan, who has the largest number of flying swords. Yu Qingzhang of the highest rank. On the contrary, He Xiangting, who likes to read, stayed up late at night to read during the heavy rain, flipping through the swordsmanship sermon and several local chronicles over and over again. He somehow managed to break into the cave realm without any bottlenecks or obstacles, which was frightening. Master Yu Yu jumped. Chen Pingan asked with a smile, He Xiangting, did you hear Qing Chaolu say that you actually want to learn boxing? He Xiangting blushed slightly. Bai Xian, Yu Xiehui, why bother, they also want to learn boxing from Master Chao. Chen Pingan said, if Bai Xian knew that you were a girl, he wouldn't speak so out of tune. He Xiangting's face turned red. It turned out that she had been pretending to be a boy for the past few years and was able to deceive fellow villagers such as Bai Xian and Yu Xiehui, but of course she could not deceive the young hermit official. Chen Pingan hesitated for a moment, thought carefully, and then smiled and said, I know that the 9 of you, in the eyes of me, Yu, Chui Sect Master, Chief Zhou, and us so-called seniors, your sword training qualifications and future achievements are very important. Ranking. In fact, He Xiangting had the least confidence in himself. After all, the qualifications of Bai Xian and King Sun Chun, who was nicknamed Dead Fish Eyes by Bai Xian, were obvious at a glance. If we evaluate it in the terms of Haoran Antique Shop, it is a big door. Among the remaining 7 of them, Yao Xiaoyan owns 3 natal flying swords. He Gu and Yu Xiehui each have their own strengths. In short, He Xiangting just feels that he is too ordinary. Even for a long time, the little girl felt that the reason why she was taken out of the Sword Qi Great Wall by the young Yinguan was due to the military exploits accumulated by her family and preachers. Just like the Haoran Mountain dynasty, some people had a good pregnancy. It was just good luck that he relied on Zhu Yin to get his official title. But because he had just broken through and entered the 5th level, He Xiangting gained a little more confidence. After all, whether the sword cultivator has the spirit or not ultimately depends on the level of the realm and the speed of breaking through the realm. Yu Qingzhang looked gloomy and said, no matter how others rank, I will definitely be at the bottom. Chen Pingan shook his head and smiled. Yu Qingzhang, did you know that your flying sword is named Duanyang? Yu Qingzhang nodded and said, I heard uncle say that it seems because according to the old customs in our hometown, the day I was born, May 15th, was the old Dragon Boat Festival. I later gave birth to my natal flying sword, which was also the day at noon. Chen Pingan said, in the past, the priests of our Jinchi Great Wall would hold sacrificial ceremonies on this day, but that was in the old almanac. In fact, this is the same as the custom of the ancient Shu realm of Aquarius continent. It was first held on May 10th, May 5th is the Dragon Boat Festival, not the current Dragon Boat Festival, and May 5th, Luola Mountain belongs to the ancient Shu mountains and rivers in a broad sense, so I guess that several of your more critical Taoist passes and opportunities for enlightenment will still be in ancient Shu. I didn't follow it before. You said this because I was afraid that you would have a rebellious mentality. Just because I told you this, you knew it was so, but it wasn't so. Of course it doesn't matter now. Of the 9 children, you 2 are the most distant from me on the surface. You haven't said a word or two. From the sea to Tongya continent to Aquarius continent, you have embarrassed me all the way. It's nothing. I know it in my heart. Calculations are based on small calculations, so I always tell myself, who will be closest to me in the future, it may be the negation of you. Not only the flying sword named Duanyang, but also your name Qingzhang is also very particular. To be honest, your master Yu is shameless. Being a worshipper is not enough. He has to intervene in it. Feat, taking you away from Luopa Mountain has disrupted many of the long-term plans of sect Master Cui and I. He Xiangting blushed, and Yu Qingzhang felt strange. He always felt that Lord Yingguan at this moment was very humane and a lively person. The last time, it was a small boat floating in the sea, and Master Chow was sitting alone on the bow with his back to them eating a bowl of rice. A certain old sword cultivator was scolded several times in the room. He scolded him for being worse than trash. Situ Jiu also scolded him for having no merit in war. Going to the Great Wall of Sword Chi was just a waste of time. Even he was drunk. The drunken fairy song scolded him. How could he have the nerve to go to Luola Mountain and abduct 2 children? The old swordsman wanted to come out for a breather and chat with Master Yingguan along with his 2 disciples. As a result, the old man only had 1 foot across the threshold when he heard Shanju Qin complaining again, so the old swordsman had to take back that foot. Turn back to the lobby, determined not to get into trouble outside. Chen Pingan said these words that he had been pondering for a long time. He felt refreshed, raised the vermilion wine gourd, took a sip of wine, and said with a smile, "The universe in Master Cui's sleeves is tormenting people's hearts." Son after King Chen and Bai Xian, Yu Qingzhang persisted the longest. Later, when Yu saw you, he secretly observed you for a long time and felt that overall, Yu Qingzhang could rank 3rd. Yu Qingzhang couldn't believe it. Ranked so high. Isn't it a surprise? I couldn't help but ask myself, so I am so strong. Chen Pingan smiled and helped explain his confusion, and then gave his own evaluation. I also think Yu Qingzhang has good qualifications, a good temperament, and full resilience. Just because their hometown is on the Great Wall of Sword Chi, almost every generation of younger sword cultivators will feel that they are not very good. Throughout history, there have been many truly strong men and there have been so many genuine geniuses that many geniuses dare not consider themselves geniuses. Chen Pingan shook the wine bottle in his hand, squinted his eyes and said with a smile, "It's like some wines, with great staying power." Yu Qingzhang was speechless. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "But none of us can, and of course we are not willing to, look to death on your future achievements. Just talking about He Xiangting, she is now in a higher realm than you. Because she is also reading, He Xiangting was able to read each book from the thickest to the thinnest, but Yu Qingzhang, who also liked reading, was not able to do so. He Xiangting had read many truths that she recognized in her heart from the book, and she began to recognize Haoran Tianxia to a limited extent, but Yu Qingzhang did not. I still doubt the truth in the book and the world outside the book, maybe except for the occasional 2 or 3 things. Deep down in my heart I always reject everything except the Great Wall of Sword Chi." He Xiangting said shyly, "Master Chow, am I really that good at studying?" Chen Pingan smiled and said, Am I a close disciple of the literary sage lineage, or a gentleman appointed by the Chinese Confucian temple? Will I talk nonsense about studying? Yu Qingzhang was silent for a moment, rubbed his cheeks with both hands, and said softly, "Remember uncle and my swordsmanship preacher, before they went to the battle out of the city, they all actually admired and appreciated Master Chow. One said the second shopkeeper is the kind of outsider who is willing to take a sincere look at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, a man who would regret Ning Yao's favor, not a sword cultivator. He Xiangting's grandfather has a similar view." After that, several of them sword cultivators violated the stern military order issued by Fei Jin in the Summer Palace and went out of the city to fight without authorization. On top of the city, there was no way to save him, and there was no sword cultivator to rescue him. Chen Pingan just kept silent and did not comment. He did not tell the two children in detail what was right and wrong here. On the road of growth, to untie the bell you must tie the bell, and you need to untie the knot on your own. Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting were taken out of their hometown by Master Chow, the culprit. The two children traveled together in foreign lands, and actually began to gradually understand the actions of the young hermit official. The problem is that when they begin to understand the decision of a summer palace, they feel even more uncomfortable. Maybe things in the world are so weird. Only when you know right and wrong can you care. I remember that big white goose once said something that they only half understood. Those who do not distinguish between good and bad, and only use interests to decide right and wrong, only deal with things, not themselves. In addition to teaching swordsmanship, Master Yu would tell them about the local customs in various places during his travels. However, the master almost never reasoned with them. Only once, when he arrived at Liuxia continent, did he deliberately use a plain tone. It seems like I made a digression. If the same thing is done by different people, it may not be the right thing if it is good. Bad is not necessarily wrong. He Xiangting said, "Master Chow, we will return to Luopa Mountain often in the future." Yu Qingzhang hummed. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Over there in Liuxia continent, you must also practice hard and be sure to break through, so that Master Chow can hold your lap in the future. In the vast mountains and rivers of the 3 continents to the west, you can walk around the world under a pseudonym, and you only need to report to Yu Jian with the name of He Jianxian. You can settle things without taking any action." Yu Qingzhang grinned and said, "If we can't do it at the moment, we can report our master's name first." He Xiangting rolled his eyes, saying that he didn't want to open any pot. Master and the old man were almost scolded to death in the lobby. Chen Pingan smiled and joked, "Remember before I became the sword immortal, whether I am alone or with friends, outside Liuxia continent, if I meet an old guy who is not long-sighted and has a high level, anyone who dares not to take your master seriously should just say that you have an anonymous little master named Chen Pingan. Let them consider it." He Xiangting blinked and said, "Master Chow, would it be more effective to give Sister Ning's name and pretend that she is our little master?" Chen Pingan's golden signboard sighed, "In the vast world, the mountains and rivers of Zhozhou, my name is definitely enough." Ningyao walked out of the lobby and sat next to He Xiangting. "Are you okay?" Chen Pingan put away the wine gourd at lightning speed and said energetically, "I didn't drink much, this little wine is just a drizzle." He Xiangting, who was caught in the act, quickly called out to the ignorant Yu Qingzhang, got up and left. They crossed the threshold together and turned to look at the steps outside the door. I found that Chen Pingan was also turning his head to look at them. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Your master's wine is very good, help to block the wine. That city Jianxian is pretending to be drunk. I know his drinking capacity clearly. He is pretending to be drunk and really swearing." In the room, a certain swordsman from the beauty nest said that he was really drunk, so don't blame him for his bad words, and tried his best to persuade others to drink. Hearing this, he immediately lay back. Chen Pingan had gone to Jinwu Mountain before, and at the foot of the mountain he met Huan Shu, the master in charge of the ancestral master hall. He was so senior that he was actually the great-uncle of the master of the mountain, Yueding. This means that Huan Shu is either the junior disciple of the founder of Jinwu Mountain in Alpine Continent, or a sage assigned to a certain martial arts temple in Alpine Continent by the ancestral family of the Central and Eastern military dynasties. In short, if Huan Shu is really willing to take charge of affairs, he can take charge of not only Jinwu Mountain but also the internal affairs of Fengshua Temple. In the Longji Mountain belonging to Jinwu Mountain, 30% of the sword-sharpening stones that have not yet been mined can be donated to Luola Mountain. Jinwu Mountain made 3 requests, one of which was related to the Ascension City of Colorful World. Ning Yao nodded and agreed, it's a small thing. It's also a good thing. The covenant on the mountain is much more reliable than the love vow between men and women in the city. Chen Pingan asked, has Chen Ji thought about when to leave the mountain? Ning Yao said, still waiting and watching. A person's sudden wealth often depends on fate and luck, because the ancestors have accumulated karmic virtues, and with the ancestral shadow paving the way, future generations will seem to have great luck and become prosperous. A family or a sect has a long and steady flow, which shows its skill. Ning Yao said, since the banquet is held on the 5th day of May, I will try to come here 2 or 3 days in advance and arrive in early May. Chen Pingan subconsciously scratched his face like millet grains, and you all guessed it accurately. Am I just a fool? Ning Yao smiled and asked, do you need me to be the bridesmaid on credit? Chen Pingan nodded quickly and said, it's necessary, it must be needed. There were 2 relatively young Earth Immortal sword cultivators, Yan Hodao and Tian Xian. They walked out of the lobby hand in hand and said they wanted to be guests of Tongyi's Hao Qingping sword sect. Of course Chen Pingan would not refuse, and there was no need to say hello to Cui Dongshan. Effective immediately, the 2 of them were already guest ministers of the lower clan. All we have to do is go through the process at the Qingpingfeng Ancestral Master Hall and ask the headmaster Cui Wei to spread out the golden and jade genealogy booklet and record his name on it. The student carried a small to dig into the walls of the upper sect, but the teacher took the initiative to send talents to the next sect. This is called repaying evil with kindness, and the teacher is magnanimous. Because Big White Goose became the leader of the next sect, it seemed that things were not done in an honest way, and it was really too much. There was a lot of resentment on Luola Mountain about this. The boy in Xingyi once risked his life to make a remonstrance, reminding the master of the mountain that we should guard against thieves, thefts, and Dongshan. Shanzhu Chen suddenly realized at that time that he needed to take it seriously, and asked Chen Lingjun if he dared to speak out for justice the next time the 2 sects gathered in the ancestral hall of Jisa Peak to discuss matters. At that time, Chen Lingjun had just taken old immortal Jing and the others to have a solid morning drink, and he was full of courage. He patted his chest and promised that there would be no problem. It was time for someone to step forward and pour cold water on the Big White Goose. Tian Xian is Jean Dan, the woman who openly confronted Wang Jiao before. She plucked up the courage to ask Ning Yao, Ning Jianxian, can I have a word with you? Ning Yao couldn't laugh or cry, what kind of trick was this? But she still asked, what do you want to talk about? Tian Xian is also an upright person, my head is buzzing and blank. Ning Jianxian asked me to slow down first. Before going out, she had secretly drank 2 large gulps of wine, but it seemed that she was still not courageous enough. The wine was spent on talking about serious matters with the young hidden official, but when it came to Ning Yao, it was not enough. Ning Yao was rarely at a loss for words. You are from the Ruiqing Dragon King Hall, right? I heard that your ancestor went to the Sword Chi Great Wall, and there was a private house of the Sword Immortal outside the city. She has a good relationship with Lu Ji. Tian Xian was full of energy and flushed, I am a sword cultivator from the Fanji Princess Temple in Ruiqing, Grandmaster Hong. Ning Yao nodded. Chen Pingan explained to Ning Yao a few words about the origin of the murals in Ruiqing Dragon King Hall and Fanji Princess Temple. Tian Xian was in a very excited mood. This time he went out, he was in a bad mood. Tian Xian, who was well known in the Ancestral Master Hall for her unique ideas in Ruiqing, felt that she had not been exposed to a spell from Void Lord Wang Jia before, as if she was sorry for this opportunity. Then there was a nascent soul sword cultivator named Hua Qinggong, who was also a popular female swordsman in the 3 western continents of Hauran. She wanted to be a guest of the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect in Qi Tingji in Nanposu Continent. Of course, I don't dare to hope for a memorial service. As a rule, seats in the Ancestral Hall need to be arranged for offerings, especially those with higher rankings. On the other hand, the standard and salary of the guest ministers are not as high as those of the enshrined ministers. Generally speaking, the more the merrier in large sects and small immortal mansions. Of course, Qi Lao Sword Immortal's youthful appearance and Fengshen Zhuran are also one of the reasons. Chen Pingan nodded and said, I will help deliver the message. Hua Qing said politely, it doesn't matter whether it works or not. To be honest, in front of a young hermit official, saying that he was going to be a guest of another kendo sect was already inappropriate. It's just that his family has branches and titles in Nananposu Island, and has established a mountain sect that can barely be considered second-rate. Having the identity of a guest minister of the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect, I can take care of him even more. No matter how pure a swordsman is, no matter how free he is physically and mentally compared to others, he is still a worldly figure in the world of mortals. Chen Pingan smiled and said, I don't dare to vouch for you saying that I am a guest. I am just a guest. Sword Immortal Qi still has to give me this face. Damn it, sect leader Qi managed to cut off so many returning, private swords hidden in various places in the wilderness. If you don't even give me this bit of face, then don't blame me for going to the Dragon Elephant Sword Sect myself to learn from them. Chao Gun and the 3 walked out of the lobby smelling of alcohol and sat down on the steps. Ning Yao took one side, and they had to squeeze in on the other side of Lord Yinguan. The snipe and the clam were fighting for the fisherman's profit, and Chao Gun and Scrofulariaceae were fighting for the position. At that time, Song Gaoyuan really couldn't stand it anymore. How can you be such a flattering swordsman? He really didn't have any shame. So he bumped Chao Gun away with his shoulder and sat down first, near the water tower, imitating Lai Yuan. In the tone of Gao Xuandu, the deputy head of the academy, Song Gaoyuan said with a smile, Thank you for your hard work, Lord Yinguan. When are you going to visit our Lujiao Palace? Chen Pingan asked with a smile, Forget it this time, money is tight and I didn't bring any gifts. By the way, why haven't the 3 of you formed an alliance yet? Fuyazu Lujiao Palace, Jinjiazu Kongling Sect, Lixiazu Fengzuan Sect. The 3 parties have not yet concluded an alliance with each other. To say that they were not familiar with each other before, the relationship on the mountain was average, but with the fateful friendship between the 3 Chao Guns, and the 3 sects, it can be said that they all fought to the death during the battle. Chao Gun explained with a smile, the 3 sects have accumulated enough military exploits. In the past few years, they have been busy preparing to build the next sect, but there is not much movement. The respective ancestral halls are not willing to make a big fuss about this kind of thing. Our Fengzuan sects, the next sect of the Lujiao Palace, will be located on Fuyao Continent, the Kongling sect of Scrofulariaceae will be located on Liuxia Continent, and the next sect of Lujiao Palace will be located on Jinjia Continent. At that time, an alliance will be formed between the lower sections. Chen Pingan nodded and said with a smile, a time-honored sect must be prudent in doing things. Chen Pingan suddenly let out a sigh, who is in your Fengzuan sect, the Kongling sect where Scrofulariaceae belongs, and the Lujiao Palace. Song Gaoyuan breathed out from his nostrils, snorted coldly, and said with a smile, I don't deserve a name. Chen Pingan said mysteriously, Chao Gun, Scrofulariaceae, you too don't know something. When we first entered the summer palace, Cho Miao and I worked together to prevent the local sword cultivators from becoming too separated from the foreign sword cultivators. It is easy to become antagonistic, so they come up with a solution that is not a solution, which is to add sand to the other side's camp and plant spies. For example, Cho Miao asked Wang Xinxue and Gu Jianlong to move closer to me, and I asked Song Gaoyuan and Deng Liang went to their side. Deng Liang was rebellious and a typical person who forgot his friends when he saw sex. He agreed without saying a word and didn't talk to him. But I persuaded Song Gaoyuan for a long time about this. Only a boy is willing to complain, look aggrieved, bite the bullet, endure the humiliation and surrender to the enemy. Chao Gun and Scrofulariaceae looked at each other and were stunned for a long time. Did we misunderstand Song Gaoyuan? Song Gaoyuan was confused, and he really felt guilty about it, so he said honestly, there is no such thing at all. Chen Pingan sighed and said firmly, you have it. Chao Gun asked softly, where is Lin Junbai? He has no mission. Chen Pingan smiled and said, yes, why not? I had a heart-to-heart talk with him, saying that I cultivated him as a candidate for a hidden official. As long as he works hard, he will have a bright future. That kid is addicted to official positions. Your eyes will light up when you hear this. Think about it carefully, is Lin Junbai very motivated when doing things every day? Scrofulariaceae nodded and said, in this way, it all makes sense. In fact, Song Gaoyuan is not easy. Deng Liang is somewhat hopeful that the beauty will return, but we Song Gaoyuan don't ask for anything, only the word righteousness. Song Gaoyuan was busy wringing his fingers over there, muttering something to himself. Chao Gun asked curiously, my brother Song Gaoyuan, what are you doing? Scrofulariaceae then asked, brother Song, endure the humiliation and bear the burden. Tell us whatever grievances you have in your heart. Song Gaoyuan said with a smile, I am counting how many people have been sold by Lord Yin Guan with just a few words. Cho Miao, Wang Xinxue, Gu Jianlong, me, Deng Liang, and Lin Junbai. Chen Pingan laughed. None of them deliberately avoided mentioning Cho Miao in their words. After leaving the summer palace and leaving the Great Wall of Sword Qi, you can talk about it as long as you think of it. Chen Pingan raised his arms and raised the wine bottle high. The other three young swordsmen all carried wine bottles when they went out, so they all had the same movements. This Chuanjiao mountain is recognized as a piece of cake that can make even an Ascension Realm monk's heart flutter. An old man and a female cultivator came with the wind, and the majestic energy they carried directly split a large sea of clouds, and the master and disciple stopped suspended in the air. The woman's skin is as good as snow, but she is wearing a black robe. The hosta on her head is ink-colored, and the scabbard is also made of jet-black dragon tendons. She also carries a mountaineering device made of ink bamboo. What a Lishui river that rushes to the sea and never returns, what a Chuanjiao mountain full of moral integrity. A graceful waste crosses the sea of clouds, and the mountains and rivers face Chanwan. Not all of them may recognize the old monk, but they must recognize the most beautiful woman in the world. There is a female swordsman Song Pin in Jinjiazu who carries the Fuyao sword, and there is a Nyetsuea with the Taoist name Montba, in Qinggong Mountain in Lixiazu. There are two women in Sanzhou, whose beauty is the most beautiful in the world. They were talking about her and Song Pin. Now that Nyetsuea has been recognized, the identity of the old man beside her has also come to light. As expected, it was Jing Hao, the Tai Bao of the Qing Palace, and Mr. Jing was promoted. There are no Ascension Realm monks left in Fuyao and Jinjia continents after the war. It stands to reason that if a mountaintop existence with a deep city like Elder Jing takes advantage of the situation, whether it is to occupy the entire Jiaoshan mountain alone or in partnership with someone, is it not just a matter of holding it in hand? Soon there were monks who thought they had figured out the connection. Is it possible that the old swordsman who pretended to be an Ascension Realm old swordsman was Lu Hui, the #1 person in Fuyao continent in Liuxia continent? First come with one hand to cooperate with others, and then sit on the ground to divide the spoils. It is indeed a battle of skills between those in the Ascension Realm, singing a double act and acting like us. Nietsuea said in her heart, Master, that Jing Dan is already here. Jing Hao narrowed her eyes and said, since she hasn't appeared at the gate of Baidi City yet, she will follow wherever the Heartless Sect Master Gao is. Although Nietsuea didn't know what secret method the master used to track the young swordsman Gao Yi, the female ghost was really annoying and made the Changyu cave, which was already the master's possession, surnamed Gao. Jinghao caressed his beard and pondered for a moment. There was a lot of excitement along the way. They all said that there was an Ascension Realm sword cultivator in Chuanjiao Mountain who openly handed over his sword and expelled everyone. Are you kidding me? It's just ridiculous. There are only a few Ascension Realm sword cultivators who would go out and run around now. There are only a handful of Ascension Realm sword cultivators in the world, but now all the local great sword immortals have been transferred by the Confucian Temple to various fairies in the wild world. It is the newly Ascension Baishang who returned to Beiju Luzhou for retreat and came out again. We must also return to the wild battlefield as usual. As for a certain mountaintop on a certain continent in the east, it is naturally impossible to speculate with common sense. Could it be that Chen Pingon came here? Jing Hao laughed softly and said, Changyu Cave sky site, the large and small caves are intertwined with each other, just like the acupuncture points of the human body. Although it is incomplete and only half of it is broken, it is still a place that is properly managed and handled. If it is properly managed, there will be a chance to create more. The Ascension Feng Shui treasure land is the icing on the cake for me and Qinggong Mountain. If you have it, it is of course the best. You or Gao Geng, whoever will be the first to become an immortal in the future will be able to prove the truth and ascend. If not, there will be a solution. That means you two don't have enough opportunities, and you won't be so heartbroken as a teacher. On the contrary, the Shu Cave Master, who seemed calm from the beginning to the end, is so heartbroken that he almost chewed his back teeth into pieces. Changyu the cave is something that the Taoist couple has been waiting for many years and is determined to get. Can the Taoist couple soar to the sky? After all, in one fell swoop, they completed their long-term plan in one battle. As a result, a female ghost appeared and she claimed to be the Baidi City prisoner. Shunan Yuan is about to break his teeth, and I am about to laugh out loud, so happy. At first, she was fighting openly and secretly for the Changyu Cave. She was competing with Jing Dan, a ghost swordsman, for the opportunity in Lixiazu, her own territory. Jing Hao didn't fear her at all. What really needed Jing Hao's careful planning was the rising Shunan Yuan in Tianyu Cave, a newly ascended person who had accumulated external skills in a hidden way. Within the territory of a continent, we are neighbors to each other. Ascension meets ascension, and few are on the right track. Nietsuea didn't like the Tianyu Cave either, especially the Taoist monk at Shunan Yuan. I'm going to meet the young and promising sect Master Gao as my teacher. Jing Hao thought for a moment and then made this decision. He hid his figure and left the direct disciple beside him where he was. Lao Feixing quietly entered the underground cave of Chuanjiao Mountain alone. After all, he was not in Luo Mountain, especially since there was no wine table, and there was no boy in green to persuade him to drink. Jing Hao's aura was completely different. Previously, the old man Feixing, who was the leader of Yizhou Mountain, had a pleasant face and kind eyes, as if he was a fledgling chi practitioner in the lower 5 realms. Now in Fuyao Island, it can be said that I am in a deserted place. I took a step forward and went straight to the private house beside the underground river. I raised my sight and looked at the waterside pavilion with bamboo curtains hanging on 3 sides. Jing Hao clasped his hands behind his back, narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, why do I bump into you wherever I go? Are you sincerely trying to cause trouble for me, or do you feel that you have acquired a Changyu cave, feel sorry for it, and want to come to apologize?" Gao Yi saw the old monk outside through the bamboo curtain, and his heart tightened. Maybe this is called guilty conscience. With Jing Dan protecting the way, Gao Yi didn't feel it was a bit hot to take away the cave ruins from the hands of the 2 ascending realms. Now that Jing Dan has completely cut off the relationship with him, and even said hurtful words that would be useless even if he kowtows at the gate of Baidi City, Gao Yi feels like a pauper who is not good at drinking, and suddenly drank a lot. Take a big gulp of strong liquor, spit it out, and swallow it reluctantly, fearing that it will burn your throat and stomach. Jing Dan frowned and said, "If you find it annoying, just stay away." Jing Hao sneered and said, "This place is the private residence of my disciples and grandchildren. My Taoist friends are not honest in what they do, but they are very funny in what they say." Gao Yi was extremely embarrassed and looked carefully at Jing Dan and the maid Huansha, who looked calm and just made wine as usual. Jing Dan said calmly, "It was Shanzhu Qin and Liuyuan Academy who asked me to rest here for a while." Jing Hao frowned and asked, "Which Shanzhu Qin?" Jing Dan asked back, "Which Liuyuan Academy is this, fellow Taoist Jing, so ignorant?" Gao Yi became more and more nervous. Such words were not speculative, because he was not a human being inside and out. Jing Hao put her hands in her sleeves and silently kneaded for a moment, then her expression suddenly changed and she said with a hearty smile, "It turns out that we are friends of friends. What a coincidence. It's easy to talk. This place is not worth a few bucks. Don't think it's shabby. That's it, even if it's given to fellow Daoist Jing and sect master Gao as a place to stay. You are the king of Baidi City. My real backer in Qinggong Mountain is Xing Zhezhong's master. He can outrun Jing Dan, a swordsman, and Gao Yi, a fledgling young sect leader. His sect is not long-term and cannot get out of Liuxia continent. He is young and energetic, and has no rules for doing things. It all depends on personal likes and dislikes. A ignorant thing. Luck is a precious thing, but it is just a meal of dumplings for poor families during the New Year and festivals, and cannot be used as 3 meals a day. I really don't believe that Jing Juzhong would protect an unrelated sect master Gao. Jing Juzhong likes the ghost immortal Jing Dan. It's not surprising that he likes the Gao Jianxian. I, Jing Hao, write my name upside down. Of course he was very afraid of the young hidden official named Qin. But to be honest, in the desolate mountain, Jing Hao was even more afraid of the boy in green who could be brothers with the real master of Qinggong Mountain, Qin Xianjun. I was really tired from those few drinks in Luopa Mountain. For some reason, Chen Lingjun always toasted his own wine whenever he had the opportunity to help Chen Zhuliu by saying a few good words at the table. The dragon-slaying man looked at Jing Hao's performance with a smile. Jing Hao was really wrong whether he drank or not. He couldn't figure out whether to drink or not to drink as a penalty. In that unfathomable Luola Mountain, those who are not in the Ascension realm are really useless. Jing Dan, Shunan Yuan, and even the 2 sects up and down Qinggong Mountain all felt that his trip was to recruit troops and contact some old friends from other continents. It makes no sense for a mute to eat Coptish Chinensis. Just when Jing Hao was still wondering whether the word "please" from Jing Dan was her grand display of Dragon Gate formation, a familiar and warm voice sounded from behind her, "Fellow Daoist Jing, we haven't seen each other for just a few days, and now we meet again." Jing Hao quickly turned around and saluted, and said with a smile, I have met Master Qin Shan, Ning Jianxian, Master Chao. Originally, she wanted to call the junior Chao Gun on a first-name basis, but Jing Hao changed her tune when the words came to her lips. After all, that boy was standing next to Qin Pingan and Ning Yao, or to be precise, between them. Then Jing Hao immediately knew what was going on. This arrangement was done deliberately. The young Yingguan was clearly helping his own family members to come to the summer palace to persuade him to drink with Jing Hao. On the top of the ancestral mountain of the Fangzuan sect where Chao Gun was located, there is a solitary stone cliff with the words, "Mending the Sky," engraved on it. It is one of the few authentic works that Chao Gun is most proud of in the world. The founder of the mountain, whose Taoist name is Chongqing, opened a study here, also named Chongqing. Later, all the sect leaders studied and practiced Taoism here. The most amazing thing is that the Taoist name Chongqing was passed down from generation to generation, just like the dynasty under the mountain. The title is hereditary, which is the only honor in the history of the world. The first-generation ancestor of the Fang Cun sect once followed the Lixing to the outer world, and together with the group of Ascension Realm monks, they pursued and suppressed the remnants of the gods in the vast Taishu realm. And this immortal Taoist, who had been a Taoist for 100 years and soared into the sky, fell outside the sky. Before his death, he had a last wish, saying that he hoped that the disciples of the sect could inherit his Taoist title. One day, when someone from the Fang Cun sect can join the 14th Tao realm and achieve true Tao immortality, then this precious Tao title will be returned to the world. Li Xing personally agreed to this matter. Since it is a matter decreed by the Holy Spirit, for thousands of years, countless Qi practitioners in the world, no matter how much they covet the two-word Taoist title, eternal life, can only stare at it, not daring to have any ambition or arrogance. The previous sect leader of the Fang Cun sect was an ascended realm, and his attainments in refining things were at the pinnacle. His reputation, character, and virtue both up and down the Liuxia continent were indeed better than those of Jing Hao, the leader of the Yizhou Immortal Master. Slightly better. After all, Jing Hao was the leader among the Immortal Masters in the continent, and he was quite well informed through the grapevine. He knew that the Fang Cun sect was going to establish the next sect in Fuyao continent, and it seemed that the name would be the Jiuqi sect. Indeed, as rumored by the outside world, Chao Gun will be the acting sect leader. When you reach the Jade Pu realm, you will take off the word generation. Chao Gun performed a Taoist ceremony and said with a smile, "Junior Chao Gun has met Master Jing." Jing Hao laughed heartily and said, "Sect Master Chao, there is no need to be polite. From now on, if anything happens to your sect in Fuyazhou, just say hello to Gao Gong. My disciple will soon serve as the national advisor of the Jin Pu dynasty. Maybe Gao Gong can't help much, but he can definitely help if he can." Ning Yao looked at the waterside pavilion inside the bamboo curtain. A certain young swordsman who once asked Qin Pingan face to face whether he was nervous or not felt like a light on his back in an instant. The ugly maid whom Jing Dan called Huansha maid held up a wine cup with both hands and invited with a smile, "Shuriguang, a remnant of the ancient subjugated country and a lonely ghost, met Ning Jianxian. Many years ago, I once visited Daoxian Mountain with Mr. Fan, and had the honor to visit Ning Mansion. Although he could not buy the dragon jumping cliff to treat my heart ailment, Mr. Fan stayed in your mansion for several months, and I often stayed there. Climbing to the top of the city and seeing the real vastness of the sky, my heartaches healed before I knew it." Ning Yao looked a little softer, nodded, stretched out his hand to lift the bamboo curtain, walked into the waterside pavilion, took the wine cup from the hand of the woman who had used the blind trick, thanked him, and said, "Su Zi has said, I feel at ease. This is my hometown." Chen Pingan and Jing Hao were walking by the river together and asked a question seemingly casually. "Fellow Taoist Jing has been a neighbor of Shu Cave Master for many years. What kind of person do you think he is?" Jing Hao smiled and said, Master Chen's question seems to be too general. Chen Pingan nodded and said, then narrow the scope and only look at the Shu Cave Master from the perspective of Jing Hao. Jing Hao thought for a moment, carefully weighed his words, and said, I personally don't like this new ascendant from the same continent. Chen Pingan raised his hands, tapped his fingers together, was silent for a moment, and asked, is it because he could ascend earlier, but he achieved enlightenment and ascended after the war ended? Jing Hao smiled and said nothing. That's the answer. I don't know who made the first comment. The wild cultivator is like a dog, and the genealogy is like a snake. Then an even more mean-spirited statement emerged. The wild cultivator is like a domestic dog, and the genealogy is like a wild dog. Many mountain wild cultivators like to bark when they see people. A real wild dog can bite someone to death just by opening its mouth. Jing Hao said something very sincere, so this time I competed with Tianyu Dongtian for the opportunity that was right under our noses. I actually didn't know what to do. If Xing Dan hadn't stepped in, I would have just acted on the surface. Now that I'm in a quarrel with Tianyu Dongtian, I deliberately arranged those troops in formation and manipulated them to gain momentum. In fact, I was ready to quit at any time. The best plan was to make peace with Shunan Yuan and negotiate a share. My side only accounts for 20 to 30%, that's fine. I have to fight. It's the realm of ascension, and my dual identity as the nominal number 1 immortal master in Liuxia continent, and the master of Qinggong Mountain, that forces me to fight. No argument, it's just that I really don't want to conflict with Shunan Yuan and Tianyu Dongtian. To say the least, my Qinggong Mountain only has a few disciples like Niezuea and Gao Geng who are unlikely to be great, but that couple has a good son who is one of the 10 young candidates in the world. Shunan Yuan, the owner of Tianyu Cave, has the Taoist name Jiao Ming. And there are many self-titles, Zhuangxi, Hanren, Cuegong. Next, Chen Pingan asked another question that was thousands of miles away from the topic. Is the great dragon Qiu of Middle-earth familiar to fellow Taoist Jing? Jing Hao was a little unable to keep up with Master Qin Shan's thoughts. He thought carefully for a while and then said, I'm not familiar with it. I only had face-to-face friendship with the two sect masters, but I had a few drinks with the contemporary master at the same table. Jiu once was invited to participate in the opening ceremony of a certain Liuxia continent sect, and the other time was at Tianqing Holy Mountain in Zhuhai Cave. However, I once had an encounter with the immortal Situ with the Taoist name Longbeard at the foot of Liuxia continent mountain. We both hid our identities and we hit it off at first sight. He is a good person. His conversation, Taoism, and appearance are all top-notch. It is a pity that Situ Mengjing does not have the will to be the leader of the clan. Otherwise, Dalong Qiu will be the master of the clan. I believe he can take a big step up. Chen Pingan nodded and said, business is booming. Jing Hao was filled with panic and uncertainty, fearing that Master Qin would make a false move and falsely convey the imperial edict, and he would not be able to verify anything with Master Qin Xian. Fortunately, Chen Pingan didn't continue to say anything to scare people, but just said something. Gao Geng married 2 brothers with different surnames in the Tiefu River Water Mansion, and they lived happily together. Jing Hao suddenly glanced at Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan deliberately turned a blind eye. Test me. Determine the level of my realm and the depth of my spiritual power. Jing Hao did have this intention. Seeing Shanzhu Chen's oblivious attitude, he was not sure about the true cultivation level of the swordsmen around him. It turned out that when the 2 mountain masters Jing Hao and Chen Pingan were walking by the river, a speeding Liuxia boat appeared at the Xianjia ferry closest to the boundary of Chuanzhou Mountain. On the ferry, 2 local monks from Fuyao Island, Lu Hui and Yang Qingu, stood side by side. This made the local monks in Fuyazhou who still chose to stay outside and wait to watch the excitement secretly feel happy. As Jinghao, the dragon crossing the river, he was destined to be unable to succeed. In addition, the group of people who came from other continents to fish in troubled waters were also cautious and were not in a hurry to return to the mountains. They also felt that it would be unjustifiable if there was no fight in Chuanjiao Mountain. These great monks on the top of the mountain who are invisible to the dragon seem to have made an appointment, either not to show their saints in front of others, or they like to appear in groups when they appear. Fuyao Island used to be a mountain top where the northern and southern sects faced each other. Lu Hui from Tianyao Township in the north and Yang Qiangu, a ghost cultivator in the Back Mountain, in the south, were both in the Ascension realm. Yang Qiangu, the founder of Back Mountain, had a difficult time cultivating the Taoism. He had an upright character and made enemies on all sides. In addition, his sect sheltered many ghost cultivators and heroic spirits. He was once plotted by his enemies, which led Yang Qiangu to go on a killing spree. He slaughtered more than 100 monks who had given the genealogy, and was eventually brought to Fuyao Island by Yixing, who forcibly detained him and took him to the merit forest of the Zhongta Confucian Temple. Even though the battle in Fuyao continent was brutal and the entire continent was destroyed, this Ascension Realm ghost immortal still could not leave the merit forest. The person in charge of the affairs was a ghost cultivator, the deputy mountain master. The mountain behind a mountain with the word Zong was personally attacked by Bai Ying, the demon from the throne, who broke through all the formations and ordered the monks to leave no trace. Almost all the monks from the upper 5 realms and the earth immortals died in the battle. The reason why it was almost was because there was only one golden elixir ghost responsible for protecting the God Lord, and he evacuated together with a group of young direct disciples. There were less than 10 people in total. There is not even a protector for Yupu or nascent soul. At the last meeting of the Ancestral Master Hall in Back Mountain, there was no objection to this at first, and it was planned to have a relatively young Jade Pujing enshrined in order to protect the younger monks from evacuating from Back Mountain. The Deputy Mountain Master overcame all opinions and convinced the entire Ancestral Hall with just one sentence without saying too much. When our Mountain Master opened the mountain, he was only a golden elixir. Today's eye-catching Liuxia boat, in addition to Lu Sui and Yang Qiangu, the rivals, in the past, there are also a few unfamiliar faces on board. Judging from their positions, they don't look like juniors or retinues. It is true that Lu Hui had official duties at the Confucian Temple, but this time he went back to Liuxia continent to retreat under the sect. As soon as he left the retreat, he returned to the Ascension realm. Yang Qiangu just happened to escape from Gongda Forest, but he still needed to travel to the wild world, so he made an appointment to return to his hometown of Fuyao Island together. The monks on the same ship were Gu Ken from Baidi City, who was the first worshipper of the new Back Mountain. The personal maid Gu Lingyu. There is also a female fairy who is about to land the entire Jinsui city near Chuanjiao Mountain in Fuyazhou, Xingqingjia. Tianyao Township, the leader of the clan is Lu Tue. He is a young man with a cold and vulture-like temperament, his eyes are heavy, he is spreading his palms and staring down. Lu Hui was rescued by Qi Tingji on the battlefield. The old man Feisheng, who had returned to his original appearance but could not hide his old age, had just fallen a little. Otherwise, it is estimated that Lu Hui would have been engraved on the Great Wall of Sword Qi by the savage Jia Zizhang. The other side of the city wall is on top. The lower sect of Tianyao Township was built in Lixiazu and has a white porcelain cave that ranks among the 72 small caves. Lu Hui had been recuperating there for many years. When he came out of isolation for the first time, he went to attend a meeting at the Zhongta Confucian Temple, and he was still in the realm of immortality. Fuyao continent is a recognized small continent that is only slightly larger than Aquarius continent. Before Lu Sui was born and successfully attained enlightenment and ascended to heaven, Fuyao continent's status in the vast world was no better than Aquarius continent. Local monks crossed the continent. When traveling, you will be short when you go out. If it weren't for Lu Sui's appearance, the entire Fuyao continent would not have ascended for nearly 5,000 years. Therefore, Lu Hu's successful ascension was hailed as an unexpected solution by mountains and rivers in various continents. At that time, he was attending a meeting in the Confucian temple and showed up at Yuanyangzu. Lu Hui showed up together with two immortals from Lixiaozu, Qin Zhao and Song Qian. Lu Hui frowned and said, "There are several places in the Feng Shui cave that are weird and hard to see through." During the retreat, thanks to the heavy rain, Lu Hui has now returned to ascend. Logically speaking, he shouldn't be able to see through the scene inside Chuanjiao Mountain. The majestic Yang Qinggu said calmly, "Whether it is weird or magical, you will know as soon as you go there. I want to see if Jinghao, a foreigner, can take this mineral vein away from me." Lu Hui said with a smile, "Jinghao is not a fool. This guy is famous for making plans later. He just showed up now. He probably already knows the true ownership of Quan Jiaoshan." Yang Qinggu turned his head, changed his expression, and said with a smile, "Gu Xiaoyu, what do you say? Do you need me to drive some unsightly things out of the mountain?" Gu Kan smiled and said, "Ignorance is not a crime. Let me let the news out first. If there are any evil people who dare to hide among them, please let me teach you a lesson." Yang Qinggu, who never disrespects others, praised him. Gu Xiaoyu is mature and prudent, and he does have the demeanor of a sect leader. Along the underground river in Feng Shui Cave, there are private houses on both sides of the river. The lights are brightly lit all day long, making it difficult to tell the difference between day and night. The timid ones stayed outside and watched from a distance. There were also brave ones who rushed back to their own territory. Fortunately, they were not attacked by thieves. Those poor guys who were in the middle of sexual had no intention of having a heartwarming fight at this moment. Since they were all kicked out of the Feng Shui cave by the old Ascension Realm Sword Immortal, and they are all grandsons, no one should pretend to be an uncle. The fierce martial arts on Fiazu Mountain and down the mountain are probably only inferior to that of Beiju Luzhou. On the riverside road, a group of people who appeared out of thin air were walking against the current. Yang Qinggu and Gu Kan were walking side by side. Lu Hui, who was thinking about something, was invisibly one position behind them. He was discussing with Jing Qingjia the specific matters of the establishment of Jinquaqing. There are a few dumb-headed youths who have just come down from the mountains to practice, but they don't take care of their eyes and mouths. After all, young Qinggu had been detained by the Confucian temple for many years, and this Ascension Realm Ghost Immortal never liked to appear in public. What's more, for a person who is famous in the Ascension Realm in a continent, it is the norm that he has heard of it but never seen it. Young Qinggu frowned, but he hadn't returned to Fuyao continent for more than 100 years, so he had this kind of virtue at the foot of the mountain. Gu Kan, who looked as usual, just moved sideways, taking 2 steps intentionally or unintentionally, just to make way for Lu Yi behind him. Lu Shang just raised his head. The onlookers on both sides of the river who had just walked out of the mansion immediately dispersed. Some of them forgot to close the door and climbed over the wall to return home. One side is going down the river and the other side is going upstream, just facing each other on the other side of the river. Jing Qingjia and Gu Lingyan gathered their turbans at the same time and gave a blessing to the man in green shirt on the other side. Chen Pingan smiled and clasped his fists in return. Lu Hui still had the sinister look on his face, but he still reminded Yang Qinggu in his heart, the person opposite is the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. He is one of the most famous young people in the world. As for the thorn grass in Qinggong Mountain, Lu Hui didn't even bother to introduce it, and of course there was no need to introduce it. Jing Hao smiled and said, "It's gratifying that fellow Daoist Liu has returned to the top. It's also gratifying that fellow Daoist Yang has regained his freedom. As long as he is not in Luopa Mountain, Immortal Jing is worthy of Qin Lingjun's high ranking in that collection of passers-by." Young Qingu sarcastically said, "Lu Hui, am I dazzled? Why did I see such a big turtle shell? Why did it float across the sea from Liuxia continent and come here? Is it because there is still a war here and they are coming to help us from Fuyao continent?" After all, Lu Hu's subordinate sect was established in Liuxia continent, so he still wanted to give Jing Hao some thin noodles, so he didn't agree with him. Jing Hao laughed and said, "Why should a turtle with its shrunken head talk about its shell?" Young Qingu, who was most saddened by the exposure of the short story, would take action if he disagreed with her. Jing Hao sneered, "Fellow monks, practice your skills, I'm afraid of you." Chen Pingon reached out and patted fellow Taoist Jing's arm next to him, looked at the burly man, and said in his heart, "Xing Guanhao Su, who is half a local monk in Fuyao continent, let me tell Master Yang Shan that he is very grateful to you back then." He said a few words of loyalty. Young Qingu was stunned for a moment and said, "Stop saying those vain polite words. I don't like to hear them. I can't hold courtesy and greetings in my ears. I beg Chen Yingguan to talk to Nidang Shalotzi. The magistrate's magnanimity, I would like to convey a few words. I really want to thank you, so I will show you something real. My back mountain is now rebuilding the mountain gate, and everything is waiting to be renovated. In addition, our army is about to be disbanded, and the mountain top wants to restore its pre-war heyday. It's difficult. In the next 100 years, or even 200 or 300 years, there may be a lack of a master who can really take charge of things. I heard that he went to Bai Yujing in Qingming World, so let him find a chance. When I return to Haoran World, it's up to him to write his name or not on the golden and jade genealogy of the Patriarch's Hall, but he must say a few cruel words. Within 300 years, the back mountain will be covered by his generosity." Chen Pingon agreed first, then remembered something and said with a smile, "Mr. Zheng, doesn't he have a high opinion of House Han? It is said that Jing Juzhong once appeared in Fuyao continent. When he was not busy with important matters, in his free time, this recognized first master of the demonic path even personally found the group of young ghost cultivators who returned to the sect ruins of Fuyao continent. To be precise, waiting for them in the ruined back mountain realm. After meeting, he said, since the crowds of people in the world are not as good as ghosts, it doesn't matter if there are more ghosts in the mountains behind. Young Qiangu said straightforwardly, nowadays, everyone in the world is afraid of Mr. Zheng. Even though I am a ghost, I am also afraid of him. One thing is that young Qingu is very self-aware. Jing Juzhong admires those young disciples from the back mountain, but he may not appreciate young Qingu, who has been imprisoned in the Merit Forest for many years. Young Qingu thought for a while and asked a question he had been curious about for a long time, Chen Pingon, what state are you in now? In fact, young Qingu had a good impression of this young swordsman whom he had heard about in the Merit Forest, but this ascended realm man always had such a straightforward attitude in speaking and doing things. Chen Pingon laughed dumbly and clasped his fists towards the other side. The relationship is not that familiar. Chen Pingon asked Gu Ken with his heartfelt voice, have you met Lu Yuzhou? Gu Ken smiled and replied, it's settled. He will be the deputy sect leader. Xing Qingjia will be in charge of the money, and Oriole Island Zhongsu will be the head priest. I have also met that Eugene, and he is willing to be the chief minister. Chen Pingon nodded. With this kind of prototype of a sect, the spirit is really quite impressive. Jing Hao had a slight grudge against Shanzhu Chen's dissuasive action of slapping his arm. Since we are not in Luopa Mountain, Taoist Chen's hand was too long. Chen Pingon seemed to have guessed what Elder Jing was thinking, and laughed in his heart, being friendly and making money when I go out. Fellow Daoist Jing won't think I'm nosy, right? Jing Hao stroked his beard and said with a smile. Fellow Daoist Chen overthought and said something very unconventional. Chen Pingan nodded and said, "That's good. It's better to overthink than to make too many mistakes." Jing Hao twirled his beard with both fingers and narrowed his eyes for a moment, endlessly. "Why, you are used to being a host, so you like to be a teacher in and out of the mountains." Regarding Chen Pingan's true realm, he and Chen Xianjun, the real owner of Qinggong Mountain, climbed the main road of Luolu Mountain together. In fact, Chen Qinglu revealed the secret to Jing Hao. Chen Xianjun would never lie to him about Jing Hao. Such a young hidden official is now just a hidden nascent soul realm. The truth makes sense. If the sword opens to you a mountain and the words are carved on the city, it will be without price. I heard that Chen Pingan used to travel around the world and liked to suppress the situation the most. But now it doesn't help. Instead, he needs to bluff and pretend to be a swordsman. Just thinking about it, Jing Hao felt sad. She always felt that a young man who had made great contributions to Yuhaoren should not be in such a miserable state. It seems that before, let alone pressing down his arm, the young man just shouted a few words to stop himself and pretended to be intimidating, but it was nothing. Jing Hao sighed, stretched out his hand, moved gently and reciprocally, patted the green-shirted arm next to him, and then turned to comfort the Master Qin, who was different from the past, with his eyes. On the way to practice, Taoist friends should not be discouraged. Chen Pingan smiled and nodded. It seemed that the morning drinks enjoyed by Elder Jing and Chen Lingjun were not in vain. "I'll go back first." A woman's voice sounded next to Dao Yuqin. Chen Pingan smiled softly and said, "Okay." Jing Hao leaned forward slightly and saw the woman's face clearly. Chen Pingan stopped and introduced helpfully, Senior Jing Hao from Qinggong Mountain in Liuxia Continent, whose Taoist name is Qinggong Taibao, recently took the initiative to visit us at Luola Mountain for a long time. She turned around and cupped her fists and said, "Ning Yao ascended to the city and met Senior Jing." Jing Hao's heart kept beating. She swallowed and quickly returned the gift. The old monk took the opportunity to calm down and said softly, "I don't dare to call myself a senior on Ning Jiangxian's side. As the number one person in the colorful world, Ning Yao, if she was just a sword cultivator at the ascending realm, Jing Hao Ziji definitely shouldn't be so unaware of it, even though she, an old ascendant, was not aware of it." So, Immortal Jing understood again. But this time I didn't guess the wrong answer. A long rainbow with blurred sword energy soared straight into the sky, stretching out a seemingly endless bright beam of light on the Fuyao Island territory, breaking through the sky without opening the door, and headed straight to another world. Jing Hao witnessed this magnificent scene up close and personal. The old man couldn't help but feel swayed. She was as beautiful as a jade sword and a rainbow. After all, Song Pin and his disciple Nietzue were far inferior to Ning Yao. Chen Pingan withdrew his gaze earlier and said with a heartfelt smile, "Fellow Daoist Jing, to be honest, I am not in the nascent soul realm, but now I am an immortal." Jing Hao once again understood everything from his heart, nodded and said solemnly, "I understand, fellow Daoist Chen must be the great sword immortal. Even if you, Chen Pingan, now say that you are in the 14th realm, I will nod. Otherwise, I, Jing, will have spent nearly 3,000 years of monastic life in vain. Anyway, you and Ning Yao are Taoist couples. Since we are a family, there is no need to separate our realms so clearly. Your two realms, one is the 14th realm, the other is the nascent soul realm, evenly divided, aren't they both the immortal realm?" Jing Hao couldn't help but sigh in her heart. It's great to be young, to have a good life, and not to be criticized by outsiders. Just for an instant, Jing Hao's heartstrings tightened. Something was wrong. How did Chen Pingon know that he knew that he was in the nascent soul realm? Chen Pingon smiled and cupped his hands and said, "There is no balance in matters of state. Farewell." Before Jing Hao could regain his senses, the next moment, the figure in the green shirt also disappeared. The sword immortal showed an ethereal appearance, and the sword light was like thunder, and he was thousands of miles away in an instant. Sword of Coming Chapter 1238. Chapter 1238. Mountains and seas are moving like magic. The bright moon rises over the sea. The word is really wonderful and has an endless aftertaste. Even if a swordsman uses the method of traveling in the spirit, no matter how fast he wields his sword, he will definitely not be able to compare with the 3-mountain talisman that casually crosses continents, nor can he compare with that night sailing ship. An ethereal Dharma image passed by thousands of islands in the sea. On the sea, the majestic sword energy broke through countless clouds, and the green shadow opened up extremely long roads in the clouds. Occasionally, the water descendant looked up in fear and saw the green sword light flashing away, flickering on and off. After a moment, there was a series of deafening thunder, resounding across the lonely sea and sky. Occasionally, the sword fairy lowered his sword, and his sword energy cut through the waves. He passed by a certain isolated island overseas, and the green mountains tilted to one side, making a rustling sound. Passing by an unknown fairy mansion on the sea, there are rows of gorgeous buildings and bright lights. The cyan figure that was about to hit the island in a straight line was instantly divided into dozens of sword lights, high and low, just around the ancestral mountain. The dazzling sword light separated by the mountains dragged out dazzling tracks in the air, filled with brilliance, and condensed into a line on the sea more than 100 miles away. In the gap between adjusting his breath and breathing, he slowed down the sword light, and Chen Pingon appeared, drawing a half arc. His green shirt fell on the sea, and he walked on the waves with long strides, his sleeves fluttering, filled with the sea breeze. If you want to encounter a ferry boat or a cheap practitioner traveling in the vast sea, it is like finding a needle in a haystack. Tonight, Chen Pingon actually met someone. This person drove a talisman boat and slowly followed a mysterious cloud shining under the moon. The young monk threw his pole into the sea of clouds. Chen Pingon stopped at the edge of the colorful sea of clouds. The leisurely young fishing man raised his eyes and asked in Nan Pajuo's elegant words, "Who is it?" Chen Pingon smiled and said in the most authentic Nazhou Yayan, "A land immortal who goes to sea to visit immortals." The young man twists his wrist, draws the rod and scatters the bait. Ripples appear in the sea of colorful clouds. He pulls back the fishing line, rubs a piece of secret bait on the hook again, and throws the rod once, whistling into the wind. The tiny golden fishing line becomes undetectable. More than 100 feet long, the young man smiled and said, "A fellow man." Chen Pingon nodded and said, "This master of the Tao is not weaker than others." The young man laughed dumbly and did not speak a word, while the strange man in green shirt who looked suspicious just stood there, his figure drifting with the clouds, and looked at him very patiently for half an hour. The young man had no choice but to say, "You may not catch a fish even if you sit there for decades. If you wait for me to catch a colorful crested fish before leaving, I'm afraid you will be disappointed." Chen Pingon raised his chin and asked, "Show me the fish basket?" A bamboo fish basket was hung on the bow of the boat and submerged in the clouds. The quality is good and he is clearly the Dragon King on the mountain. The young man smiled and said, "Seeing that there is no one around, you are sure that I have no protector. Are you trying to deceive me into not being a high-level person and plan to kill people and gain goods?" Chen Pingon smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, are you from Dehanshui in Anbosu continent?" The young man with an ancient jade seal hanging on his waist frowned and said nothing. Did this person come prepared? Want both the Dragon King basket and this ancestral token? Today's wild cultivators at sea have a big appetite. It couldn't be that he had bumped into a wild remnant hiding in the sea, right? Very good, the little fish won't eat the big fish, so let me weigh this person's weight. Long Qing, the founder of Dalang Shui, was also the master of this young man. He once obtained an ancient stone box protected by a in Lang Shui. There were 5 seals in the box. Long Qing only left 1 jade seal and gave away the rest to the Confucian temple. Long Qing carefully refined the jade seal for 300 years, and it became the sex treasure of Dalang Shui. It can almost be regarded as a token of the sect master. Now it is hanging on the young monk's waist. The young man put away his fishing rod, stood up, and announced his identity, Lu Xiang, a member of the Damanchuit Saiji mansion. Please tell me the name of my fellow Taoist, and teach you the tradition. Chen Pingan waved his hand to indicate that he had no intention of discussing Taoism, and said with a smile, I am very familiar with Yuan Qingshu. The young man smiled and asked, Are Master Yuan familiar with you? Chen Pingan nodded and said, It's familiar. Lu Xiang narrowed his eyes and said, Why don't you just say that there is a sign hanging above your shop that says, The world here should know that I, Yuan Qingshu, am the sword immortal. I never thought that the guy was very shameless, so he nodded and said, Fellow Taoist, help me say what I originally wanted to say. Fortunately, Lu Xiang is not weak at cultivating qi, otherwise he would really curse. I was fishing in the South China Sea, which is far away from Aquarius continent. When I met a passerby, I said that I was the last hidden official of the Great Sword Qi Wall. Do you think Shan Zaixiu is stupid because he wants to make money, or do you think I, Lu Xiang, am stupid? Chen Pingan said, Li Kai once returned a broken sword-raising gourd to Dawangshui. Lu Xiang was shocked and confused. How did this guy know such secrets? The Yunshui has a total of 5 channels, and it was Uncle Yuan who opened up the line of sword cultivation. The relic was indeed given to the Yunshui Chuiluo mansion by Li Jianxian of Duckweed Sword Lake. Chen Pingan said, Yuan Jianxian is fond of wine. He once joked with Gao Kue at the top of the city that he used a sword gourd to store wine, and used the name of a big demon to make wine and food. The taste is endless and the most delicious. Lu Xiang asked, Who are you? Damn it, if you were really that young hidden official, I would take your last name. In short, Lu Xiang just didn't believe that the man in green shirt in front of him happened to be the Qin Jianxian he had been longing for. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? Besides, Li Kai and other sword immortals who have visited Dayangshui one after another over the years all said that the new hidden official who first revealed his identity at Chunbansai in Hanging Mountain was so murderous that he almost killed his own people. Sigh. On this point, Lu Xiang verified the statements of some cross-continental ferry stewards and ship owners through various mountain rumors and gossip. The young hidden official was indeed vigorous and resolute. He once closed the door and killed people if he disagreed. The most important thing is that they all swore that the young swordsman was not ordinary handsome, with a jade tree facing the wind, and outsiders would be able to recognize his unusualness at a glance. Lu Xiang looked carefully. The man in front of him had a hosta on his head. He wore a blue shirt, a long coat and cloth shoes. In terms of appearance, he could only be regarded as Zhou Jing, but in terms of bearing. I was so stupid. I stood there and watched him fishing for half an hour. He must not be Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan smiled and said, My Taoist friends are vulgar, aren't they? People should not be judged by their appearance. Lu Xiang held it in for a long time and asked tentatively, Fellow Taoist, did you use a blind trick and use the immortal disguise technique? Chen Pingan was choked for words. If you're not a swordsman, it's just difficult to talk to. After all, Lu Xiang was feeling lucky and wanted to chat for a few words, but he saw the man in green shirt wave his sleeves. In an instant, a sea of colorful clouds surged violently, and several fish jumped out of the clouds on their own and jumped into the talisman boat. The next moment, King Shan's figure was no longer visible, and a lingering voice lingered in Lu Xiang's ears. When my fellow Taoist returned home, he just said that he caught it himself, so he didn't need to spend money to buy it from Nanhai Fish Market. Lu Xiang was stunned. Although he still couldn't determine the identity of the other party, it was definitely true that they were people of the same mind. Then at the border of the South China Sea and the East China Sea, Chen Pingan suddenly stopped and looked down at the bright moon in the sea. There was an old Taoist priest in purple clothes and a gourd on his back, rising slowly from the bright moon. It was a phantom that Yu Xian used his magical power to appear in the world. Chen Pingan said, "This junior has met Mr. Yu." Yu Xian smiled and returned the bow. "Fellow Daoist Qin, there is no need to be more polite." Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "Are you worried that the younger generation will mislead the younger generation?" Yu Xian waved his hands and said, "How is that possible? The poor Taoists' vision of people and the preaching skills of fellow Taoists are the best in the world." That's what he said, but after all, it was a bit shocking for an immortal to dare to talk about the method of ascension. At that time, Bai Jing almost mistakenly thought that his mountain master was drunk and talking drunkenly. Naturally, Yu Xian was still a little worried. Walking hand in hand on the sea covered with moonlight like snow-white fish scales, knowing what the old man was worried about, Chen Pingan carefully considered every word and said slowly, "In this closed-door practice, the real years that Taoisting needs to spend are short. 10 years, up to 100 years. Yu Xian twirled his beard silently. "You have to figure it out. With Taoisting's monastic qualifications, it is not impossible for him to achieve enlightenment and ascend within 200 to 300 years. Chen Pingan thought to himself and said, "It's not that it can't take longer, but it's meaningless." Yu Xian finally couldn't help but asked, "What should I say?" Chen Pingan said with a smile, "Don't they say that one age in the mountains means 1,000 years in the world? How can the age of a Taoist be compared with the age of a layman at the foot of the mountain?" Yu Xian became nervous and said tentatively, "Fellow Daoist Qin, Taoist Ding is the best young man in Pindo's sect. Even if the jade is not polished and cannot be used, you still have to have some restraint, right? Why don't you reveal the details to Pindao, a bystander?" So-called false years, how many years are there? Chen Pingan just gave a vague answer. It could be as short as 10,000 years, or as long as 100 million years. Yu Xian's face was full of astonishment. Half true and half false. Really, this method of fellow Daoist Qin is really unbelievable, ingenious, and something no one has ever thought of. No matter what, I am still worried that Taoisting will drift with the tide in the long river of time and waste too much time, and his Taoist heart will not be able to survive it. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Those who see the true self in chaos can attain enlightenment outside the Tao and ascend." Yu Xian asked, "Can you explain it carefully?" Chen Pingan shook his head and said, "It's not that I don't want to, but I really can't." Yu Xian reached out and grabbed Chen Pingan's arm. "We haven't seen each other for a few days, but fellow Daoist Qin has already become estranged. Didn't we talk sincerely at the top of Jiling Peak? Fellow Daoist Qin, you still owe me 500 gold coins and copper coins. It's rare for a poor Taoist to visit Hauran. If we don't discuss it, how about a total?" Chen Pingan said helplessly, "From now on, I will regularly inform the seniors about the progress of Taoisting's practice exactly as it is." Yu Xian nodded and said, "That's fine. From time to time, there will be a surprise, which is more worth looking forward to than a one-time deal." Chen Pingan thought for a while and gave an obscure so-called answer. "The ascension method I have figured out must first seek self-realization from within, then build a bridge of immortality, and finally seek the Tao from the outside. Yu Xian chewed for a while and said, "Just hearing this, my trip is worth it." Chen Pingon began to change the topic and asked, "Senior is here, do you have anything else to say?" Yu Xian grunted and pointed into the distance. "I made a temporary fortune telling that there will be a reunion in the near future. It can be related to you, of course, it can have nothing to do with it, it depends on whether you are willing to wade into troubled waters." Chen Pingon guessed the general reason and made a decision in his mind, so he asked a digression, "Why is there never a mountain sitting in the Chuanzhou mountain in Fuyezhou? Whether it is an orthodox one from the imperial court or a heroic spirit who built his own temple for obscenity, it seems like it has never happened before in history." Yu Xian hesitated for a moment and said with a smile, "There are hundreds of spirits walking around the mountains and rivers, either gods or immortals. Living in the mountains and practicing magical powers or immortal methods, there are always those who like purity." The old man put away the illusion of the moon, while Chen Pingon continued to travel on the sea with his sword. Several serious Taoist priests worked together as free masters in Tiaoyu Mountain, helping the 8 Taoist monks carefully selected from the Great Li dynasty to teach some simple Taoist methods that did not involve the sect's secrets or violate the taboos on the mountain. In fact, it is not a difficult task, and these 4 Taoist priests, who have the same ancestor but different sects, see each other every day when they look up and look down. Over time, they naturally become more familiar with each other. It is also in Tiaoyu Mountain, where the boxing is taught in the martial arts arena, and the preaching place here is in an empty hall. There are several futons on the ground. It is said that they were bought with a lot of money from Sanlang Temple in Luzhou, Beiju. Have to. Bai Feng and the others all told about their situation, but Xiang Tong refused to say another word. At that time, even Shuizhisui, the highest-ranking and senior heavenly lord, made no bones about it, saying that he was led by Master Qin into a 9-story glazed pagoda with an extra broom in his hand, and they would sweep the tower together every day. Shuizhisui started from the bottom, and Chen Pingon started from the top. Whenever Shuizhisui chose to sweep from the top floor, Chen Pingon would sweep from the first floor. Today, Liang Chaoguan asked again. Xiangtong really annoyed them, so he squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth, wandering around. It's not that Xiangtong is being pretentious, it's really the past that he can't bear to look back on. Every time he thinks of it, Xiangtong can't help but shed a handful of bitter tears for himself. It turned out that because of his high level, strange methods, and unclear thinking, he had to drag Xiangtong through thousands of mountains and rivers, and spend about an illusory 100 years. The man surnamed Chen always likes to give him difficult problems, causing him to lose his Taoist skills and no spiritual energy flowing between heaven and earth, but he forces him to be a beggar on the run, forcing him to rely on his ability to rely on a broken bowl. Only the wealthy gentry who are on the richest side can pass the test. I have worked as a fast-moving subordinate in the county government for many years. I rely on a little ancestral, 3-legged cat handle technique to arrest those gangsters who fly over the walls and suppress water bandits every day. I was almost hacked to death with a knife several times. The emperor's roll call in the capital announced the good news. I was an errand boy begging for a few rewards from the new scholars. I finally relied on my smart legs and knew how to jump over walls and take shortcuts. After getting the money, I might have to be blocked in the alley by a few colleagues. After a few punches and kicks, the guy would jump out and say a few disgusting words like, in broad daylight, under the emperor's feet, "Don't be arrogant." This scared those away, and then he would cross his arms and lean against the wall. Smiling as he looked at himself with a bruised nose and swollen face, he staggered to his feet. Chen Pingon even asked him to do the job of smashing rocks into his chest in busy thoroughfares or water transport terminals. He raised his arms high and smashed them down with a hammer, which made his chest feel tight and stars in his eyes. There was a burst of noisy cheers. In the middle, the guy had already started shouting loudly and selling dolly pills. Occasionally, there are some leisurely mountain walks. The guy said that he combines work and rest, fearing that his Taoist heart will collapse and he will not be able to deal with fellow Taoists in the future. Together we wore straw sandals and carried baskets into the mountains to collect herbs, and stopped by to visit immortals and enjoy the scenery. The guy was full of nonsense and made some nonsense that did not understand allusions and did not follow the rhythm of the common and oblique rhymes. He said that the king was a poet but the guest was a guest, and the prime minister was Bo Wu Fu. Only Dr. Chin can understand the pity of the fragrant children. He also took over a boot shop that was in a sluggish business in the capital of the country. How did Xiangtong know this? He was naturally blinded. Finally, under the guidance of Qin, Xiangtong sold a roster of officials by the way. Really making money. Xiangtong also worked as a silversmith who cheated and cheated. Not only was his business experience full of copper odor, but Xiangtong, who thought he had some bottom line as a human being, was about to fall out with that guy. However, they also opened a prosperous incense and candle shop outside a certain temple. He doesn't make money or lose money. Xiangtong is neither busy nor idle every day, he just feels calm. Liang Chaoguan saw that Xiangtong, who was known to be arrogant, was acting like a gourd again, and wondered, Xiangtong, since you hate Shanju Qin so much, why do you still stay? If you leave, wouldn't you be invisible? Not worried. Xiangtong was silent for a moment and said dully, stay here and sharpen your Taoist heart. Liang Chaoguan patted Xiangtong on the shoulder, laughed and said, face the difficulties and rise to the top. Xiangtong glanced sideways at Liang Chaoguan, who was getting close to him, and the latter retracted his palm angrily. Xiangtong then asked, what is the approximate level of the qualifications of these children among the youngest generation of Taoist priests in our Taofu mountain? Bai Feng intertwined her hands and fingers, straightened her waist, and stretched out a lot. She was really too lazy to answer such an idiotic but charming question. Liang Chaoguan smiled and said, after all, they are the immortal seedlings selected by the Song family of Dolly with the efforts of the whole country. It is not difficult to switch to our side and become the direct disciples of the members of the ancestral master hall of each peak. One or two have the best qualifications. No matter how lucky you are, if you fall into the eyes of a certain ancestor, become a disciple, and practice Taoism for hundreds of years, you might become the second best Lu Biyu in the Faxian palace of a certain peak. Lu Biyu was helpless. Although he was in Faxian palace, Liang Chaoguan was at Yufeng in Taofu mountain, his ancestral home. There were 4 sects in one mountain and countless Taoist priests. Before coming to Luola mountain, he had never met this immortal Yufeng who was extremely destined to be immortal. Any intersection, but Liang Chaoguan has long been heard of. After all, he is a Taoist genius who went to Yunmeng Cave to practice based on his true ability. In addition to practicing Taoism, according to the sect's internal newspapers and some rumors, Liang Chaoguan was a very serious Taoist priest who practiced both talismans and swords. He didn't seem to be so arrogant in his words. The girl in the mink hat checked the Taoist progress of those little melons. She looked unhappy, frowned, and was not very satisfied. She clearly taught the Taoist formula seriously and explained every step carefully. Why is there still nothing? He was bumping around like a fly on his head and just yelling a few words, but it showed that his preaching ability was not good enough. Xiago then tried to encourage a few words, intending to let a certain ordinary priest teach it several times according to the outline he had drawn up. A fool teaches stupid man, maybe a negative can make a positive, and it will have a miraculous effect. Xiago glanced at Bai Feng's chest. The girl in the mink hat said nothing, just shook her head, sighed, and left. Liang Chaoguan lowered his voice and asked, Miss Xia, what do you mean? Lu Biu would not dare to express an opinion on such an issue. Xiangtong said honestly, I find it too cumbersome. Lu Biu said, Miss Xia is not simple. Liang Chaoguan echoed, it's unpredictable. Bai Feng sneered, drink the wine to understand. Xiangtong, who was born in Hebei Peak, has the highest realm and actually has the highest vision. He hesitated to speak, but still did not express his guess. Xia Go, who has a girlish appearance, is most likely a swordsman whose swordsmanship is far superior to me. Yes. Xiangtong believed that this second-in-command of Lola Mountain had cut down the old throne. I heard that she also has a Taoist companion named Xiao Mo. If nothing else, he will also be a swordsman. Liang Chaoguan held the back of his head with both hands and sighed, I really don't know how Mr. Qin gathered them together. Except for the divine continent of Middle-earth, all continents are either nominally one continent Taoist masters like Tianjun Qizhen and Xie Shi, or mountain leaders like Jing Hao, with unlimited glory. But if we really want to calculate the size of the territory of the 4 seas beyond the 9 continents is so vast that it is far from being comparable to the land, mountains, and rivers of a certain continent. In addition to the powerful Mrs. Dandan who is in charge of land and water transportation, there are also the new kings of the 4 seas, the true Dragon King Zhu of the East China Sea, Li Yeho of the South China Sea, Bright Moon, Lu Roshi of the West Sea Bun, and Wei Chuanting of the North Sea, Hongyun. The underwater mansion of Lord Donghai. Recently, purple air has risen in the mansion, and the atmosphere is majestic, forming a huge whirlpool on the sea. The subordinates and generals of Shuifu have to patrol everywhere to enforce martial law. Unless they hold a special ultimatum issued by the inspection department, no one can approach. Nowadays, there are 24 divisions under the jurisdiction of Shuifu, scattered all over the place, like the imperial city of a secular dynasty, occupying thousands of miles of territory, guarding this palace city in the middle. Outside the 9-foot-tall vermilion lacquered gate, in the blue-green jade square, an old man in green shirt appeared out of thin air with his hands behind his back. It's so magnificent and magnificent, it's very intimidating. A golden-armored general holding an iron spear lightly poked the ground with the bottom of the spear and asked in a deep voice, Who is coming? Please identify yourself quickly. The old man ignored it and just looked up at the high and low plaques. Another high-ranking divine general from Shuifu came to the door, followed by a group of elite soldiers with clanging iron armor. The uninvited guest who didn't know how to cross the many passes still didn't look at the water palace priests and soldiers. The general stretched out his hand to hold the handle of the knife and reminded, it is a serious crime to break into the water house without permission. The old man looked away, bored, yawned, and said with a smile, I have to suppress my realm to avoid scaring you to death. It's very hard. The Saber God General took a step forward, you are still trying to be mysterious. If you don't tell me your name, don't blame me for taking you to the water prison. The old man in green shirt said, Okay, I have nothing to talk to you. Let Wang Zhu get out and see his old friend. The general was about to activate the Shuifu formation and mobilize one of the water veins to hit this old guy who spoke freely. As a result, the high-ranking general was horrified to find that the water vein belonging to one of the water palace formations was completely uncontrollable. The old man thought to himself and said, That's right, how dare she show up in front of me? A torrential rain spread to the whole world, and there were many rainwaters. The little girl was lucky, allowing her to take the lead and break through. Indeed, compared with luck, compared with this evil dragon who survived the disaster, Li Yeho a few are not dominant. So she is even more afraid to see me. A goddess from the ceremony department hurried over, her expression respectful, but she hesitated to speak. How to address each other is really difficult. The person coming is Chen Qinglu, the man who killed the dragon. The old man said, Hey, finally someone who is not blind appears. The chief officer of the etiquette department gave a blessing and said, "I have met Chen Xianjun." Chen Qinglu nodded and said with a smile, "Wang Zhu has made up his mind not to go out to entertain guests." The female officer looked embarrassed. Just now King Zhu of Shui made a decree, which roughly means to thank guests behind closed doors today. Chen Qinglu sneered, "You must be scared to death." Some Shuifu generals who wanted to humiliate their ministers would still fight him even if they had guessed the identity of the old man in green shirt. Chen Qinglu moved forward, and together with the female official of the Department of Ceremony, a group of Water Palace divine generals and soldiers could not help themselves. No matter how hard they struggled, they still had to kneel on the ground to use their magical powers. Like the way of heaven slowly pressing down on the top, they could not help but stand. Every step Chen Qinglu took. In a main hall of Shui Mansion, Shui Lord Zhu, who was sitting on the dragon chair, had a distorted face and was pale and colorless. His hands that were tightly covering the handle of the chair began to tremble. When Chen Qinglu entered the water mansion and got closer and closer to the main hall, Wang Zhu, who had already reached the 14th realm, still did not dare to even think about leaving the dragon chair. When Chen Qinglu was strolling in the courtyard, he came outside the threshold of the main hall. In the main hall, there was no longer the human form of King Zhu of the 14th realm, but a huge snow-white dragon entrenched himself. The huge body of a real dragon, even if it tried its best to curl up, still occupied half of the wide and deep hall. Chen Qinglu still had his hands behind his back, his expression was as usual, but there was a bit more sarcasm in his eyes. He raised one foot, stepped on the threshold, and said, a little stronger than before, "I just hid, not ran." The giant snow-white dragon slowly raised its head more than 10 feet high. It was just such a small movement, as if all its energy and power had been consumed. It's staring at that butcher. A blood feud, nothing more than that. Chen Qinglu smiled and said, "Are you desperate? You are already in the 14th realm, but after seeing me, you find it so difficult to even raise your head? After a slim hope is shattered, it is probably true despair." Wang Zhu was confused, but he maintained his true spirit, and said hoarsely, "If you kill me, you will also fall." Confucian Temple rules. It is destined to be unable to stop this dragon-slaying man. And Wang Zhu will never go to the Confucian Temple to beg for mercy. Chen Qinglu sneered and said, "Today's world is different from the past. Is there still a shortage of true dragons? If you kill one Wang Zhu, there will naturally be a second one to fill it, and some people will be busy." 3,000 years ago, in the battle of slaying a dragon, there was no true dragon in the world. A Lizhu cave was created out of thin air. Chen Qinglu retired after his success and disappeared without a trace. But even if he never shows up again, in the past 3,000 years, there is still no dragon species in the world that dares to cross the Thunder Pond. I was just passing by and came here to be a guest, but what you said didn't make sense. Chen Qinglu smiled and said, "Then take your head and try to polish the edge of the long sword that has been used for 3,000 years. This snow-white true dragon's golden eyes showed obvious hesitation, and its 2 dragon whiskers slowly swayed, creating bursts of pure golden light. Chen Qinglu has an unknown Taoist name, Qingzhu. This dragon-slaying man possesses a more concealed single-character flying sword. But it was not like this from the beginning, but the sword cultivator cultivated the sword through battle, tempered the sword edge, and polished it bit by bit. Fijian's natal magical power is just one word. Cut. Chen Qinglu stretched out his hand and grabbed it. The endless sea water in Shui Mansion dried up in an instant, and finally condensed into a long blue sword. Standing up the long sword, Chen Qinglu put his fingers together and flicked it lightly, causing the sword body to vibrate and tremble. Wang Zhu was already very reluctant to resist the aura that was like the pressure of heaven. However, she absolutely refused to kill him by the neck. She raised a claw and pressed the ground of the hole. Chen Qinglu shook his head. You guys from the new 14th realm are simply incredibly weak. Wang Zhu was actually suppressed to the point where he lost his true body and returned to his human form, bleeding from all his orifices, and curled up on the dragon chair. At this moment, Chen Qinglu was about to cross the threshold and decapitate the poor guy with a sword, when he suddenly stopped and cursed with a smile, "Old you, I like to be nosy." It turned out that there was a middle-aged man beside him, who also looked like a Confucian scholar in blue shirt. It was Chen Pingon. Chen Qinglu exclaimed, "Haven't you two already terminated the contract?" Chen Pingon nodded and smiled. "Unknowingly, I passively formed the contract, and when I came to my senses, I took the initiative to break the contract." Chen Qinglu squinted at the young mountain master and tooted, "Young man, with Ningyao as a Taoist monk, are you still not satisfied? Eat what's in your mouth and think about what's in the pot, isn't it?" Chen Pingon couldn't laugh or cry. This was nothing. Want to save her? How? A little Yuaning, who just jumped over the immortal realm on the first level of Yupu, dares to show up here. Chen Qinglu turned around and casually shook the sword in his hand. "Apart from the realm, why don't we talk about the realm?" Chen Pingon glanced at Wang Zhu, who was sitting on the dragon chair in the room. Wang Zhu's face was frosty and he looked unappreciative. Chen Qinglu held the sword in one hand, took a step towards Chen Pingon, and said with a smile, "I don't understand. I am very curious. How are you going to stop me, just because our surname is Chen?" Chen Pingon bowed and said, "I beg you, senior, to sheath your sword boldly." Wang Zhuping was furious for no reason and screamed, "Don't beg him. When you were young, you asked for help, when you were young, you asked for help, and now you still ask for help. I, Wang Zhu, have reached the 14th realm, and the luck of the dragons in the world is condensed in me. You are responsible for your own life and death, so you don't need to meddle in your own business." Chen Pingon squinted into the hall and said angrily, "Shut up." Wang Zhu was so angry that his whole body trembled. Chen Qinglu reminded with a smile, "Chen Pingon, think about it. If you become my enemy today, the price will be high and the consequences will be even greater." Chen Pingon's eyes were firm and he said slowly, "Mr. Qi has entrusted Wang Zhu with something, and I need to be her protector at least once. At least for now, Wang Zhu who left Lizhu Cave has not done anything arrogant. Senior, there is no need to pass the sword to kill the dragon for the time being." "Oh." Chen Qinglu twitched his lips. "Did Qi Jingchen tell you that personally?" Chen Pingon shook his head and said, "Mr. Qi, there is no need to say it." Chen Qinglu smiled and said, "Immortal realm, it is too useless. Why don't you ask the old scholar to come over and make paste? I also have a suggestion. It is best to bring the ceremonial saint with you." Chen Pingon was silent. Chen Qinglu waited patiently for a moment and sneered, "How can a person live such a pitiful life?" Shaking his head, Chen Qinglius' wrist shook, and the long sword dispersed into the sea water. "You want bully a junior, just think that you owe me a duel with me." Chen Qinglu glanced at Wang Zhu and joked, "Can't you promise me twice for saving your life? I can help guard the door." Wang Zhu raised an arm tremblingly, lowered his head, and wiped the blood on his face with the sleeve of his dragon robe. Chen Qinglu put his hands behind his back and said, "Chen Daijiangxian, will you accompany me for a walk?" Chen Pingon nodded. Chen Qinglius' first question was unexpected. At the Great Wall of Sword Qi, has Chen Qing ever evaluated his swordsmanship? Chen Pingon said truthfully, "The boss sword immortal has never mentioned the senior." Chen Qinglu rubbed his chin, "It's really irritating." Chen Pingon smiled. Chen Pingon asked curiously, "I have a question. did Zhou Zi target you during your spiritual practice? Chen Qinglu laughed and said, I don't like to meddle in other people's business when I'm full. Besides, I can't become a pure sword cultivator in the 15th level. I'm not pure enough. Chen Qinglu changed the question again. I just showed off my water-carrying sword skills a little bit. What do you think is the difference between me and Chen Qingdu? Chen Pingan said, if we put aside the killing power, each one has his own merits in swordsmanship. Besides, the gap in swordsmanship is not small. Even if they are perfect, they are still the same size. Chen Qinglu nodded without saying a word, but started to turn around. Wang Zhu, who had just sat up in the hall, turned pale in an instant. Chen Pingan had no choice but to add, the senior said that he was destined not to become a 15th level sword cultivator. The junior thought it was a self-deprecating statement. The Qing master who came out of the mountain with a sword and then put away the sword and retired to seclusion would never be so low-spirited. Chen Qinglu hummed. Only talk about the spirit, not the achievements. That's quite the truth. The two were silent and walked side by side. Before Chen Qinglu left this East China Sea mansion, he said something for no reason. What if you have reached the pinnacle of cultivation in the human world, but you are the least free? If you establish a religion and claim to be your ancestor, you will feel that the world is narrow and the world is narrow. After saying this, Chen Qinglu went to the wild world through a passage back to the ruins. Chen Pingan just wanted to travel far away with his sword, so he continued on his way. Wang Zhu, who had returned to normal, came to him. After all, he is a member of the 14th realm in his own dojo. Chen Pingan said, when I was able to get the opportunity to become a sword holder, what I did and thought is not the real key. In the final analysis, it was because of the trust Mr. Qi gave me. Wang Zhu pursed his lips. Chen Pingan said calmly, whether they are here or not, don't let down those who gave us hope. Wang Zhu bit his lip. Chen Pingan put his hands in his sleeves, as long as you never let Mr. Qi down, I am asking a senior not to draw a sword today, and I won't have to do it in the future. Wang Zhu turned to look at her former neighbor, and she slowly raised her hand. Chen Pingan instantly moved a few steps sideways, his expression full of alertness. After all, there is a difference between two realms now. Wang Zhu, however, just had narrow eyes and smoothed his hair from his temples. Chen Pingan tiptoed a little and left the water mansion with sword light like a rainbow. In a peaceful world, the earth is spring, the countryside is thick with smoke, and guests come from the west, and their clothes are still stained by the rain of apricot blossoms. Luolo Mountain, this day came a clear old man dressed in Taoist robes, with a gourd tied to his waist. He was dusty and had a piano bag on his back. Immortal Jia just happened to come to this table today to drink tea and reminisce attentively with Taoist Immortal Wei, who has now been promoted to the head of a mountain. The visitor claimed to be Lushan Taoist priest Hong Qingxian, named Yujin. Because I didn't think about mountain climbing, I didn't register my name with Taoist Xian Wei. The old Taoist priest was more talkative and said he was good at playing Lei's harp. He met an equally talkative Jiao Lao Shinxian and they had a good conversation. The old Taoist priest took off his qin bag and showed his hand. Jia Sheng was full of admiration and commented from the bottom of his heart, it is indeed the sound of nature, clank and sound, without smoke and fire, and the meaning is not human. In fact, there are often Qi practitioners like Hong Qingxian who pretend to pass by, at the foot of the mountain. But there are not many people like the old Taoist priest who dare to sit down at the table. Hong Qingxian drank tea and got very close to the old immortal Jia. He stepped on the watermelon rind and chatted about everything. It was just chatting. Now he mentioned that he had a friend. His official career was quite smooth, and he once became the Minister of Rights of a country. God Jia sees things through but doesn't tell them, he makes friends out of nothing. Hong Qingxian continued, Pin Dao met him when he was young. When he was a secretary, he got to know this arrogant young man who served as a guard. Immortal Jia asked tentatively, become an official? Hong Qingxian smiled and nodded, revealing his shortcomings. He is indeed a high-ranking official. He is the kind of secretary who writes as much as he gets on the bus and is a secretary regardless of his body. Jia Xing stroked his beard and smiled and said, Taoist family comes from a friendly family, no wonder his speech and behavior are so elegant and natural. Hong Qingxian continued to tell the story of that friend. The prodigal's son returned with gold. From a young man who ran rampant in the capital and acted absurdly, he suddenly woke up and began to study hard. After becoming the minister of the Ministry of Rights, he had suggestions with the emperor. The king who controls the country and the minister who governs the country. It is a good thing to believe in the Buddha sincerely, but you should not blindly flatter the Buddha. If all the people's anointing and blood were used to make sacrifices for the feast, how could the Buddha, if he had a spirit, be willing to pay for it? If one obtains blessings by damaging the national treasury, wasting agricultural work, and wasting people's energy, then the blessings will surely exceed the blessings prayed for. Practicing Buddhism can provide you with the resources for the next life. Confucianism's cultivation of Qi Jinping is the solution to today's issues. The second monarch changed his mind and began to advocate Taoism, and then destroyed temples and exterminated Buddhism. It was still the old man who had just been awarded the title of Crown Prince and Taibao, who openly opposed the emperor's plan to destroy Buddhism and worship Taoism. The reason is that it is wrong to say that today is near and the next life will be far. So the future life is far away and today is near. It is also wrong to only look at today's tomorrow and not the present life and the afterlife. In both the government and the public, some people said that he was just fishing for fame and reputation, and that he would not be able to keep it in his later years. Only a few people think that he is a true scholar. Having said this, the old Taoist priest raised his withered palm and patted the piano bag on the table gently. From young to old, we have been close friends, but when he became an official, he became a Taoist and became an immortal. It was inevitable that he would gradually drift away. There are no books anymore. Time has passed and times have changed. I revisit my old place. The old romances have been blown away by the rain and wind. The house of my old friend is overgrown with weeds. The old wooden tree is slanted and thin and tough, and the branches are like veins. There is only one ancient begonia, which is still worthy of the title. She is graceful and graceful, like a peerless beauty admiring herself. Immortal Jia sighed endlessly and added, I don't know how many people have fallen drunk in the shadow of flowers. Cui Qingxian picked up the water bowl and said sadly, there is no solution. Jia Xing was reluctant to comment on this matter, so he just picked up the bowl and clinked it with Cui Qingxian. At this moment, the young Taoist priest sitting on the bamboo chair suddenly said, there is a solution. Cui Qingxian turned his head and asked with a smile, what's the explanation? The Xianwei replied, if you are weak-minded, you will resign and retire to the mountains and forests. This kind of high-spirited and upright behavior has been seen by the descendants of the family, the government and the public, and they all know that there are scholars in the world who study like this, so this is right. It was really helpless and it was difficult to change the situation from bad to clear. I had to make mistakes and join in the bad luck with those who did not follow the same path. However, I tried my best to patch things up in secret and did many good things that benefited the people and the country. Outsiders also let them criticize me. Go, your reputation will be ruined in one moment, but you have a clear conscience, so this is right. Two things, two people, and two hearts have never been in vain. They have truly taken root and will blossom and bear fruit in the hearts of others. They may not have lush branches and leaves, but they are like that begonia. After hearing this, the old man thought seriously for a moment and sighed, "That's it." Taoist Xian Wei smiled and said nothing. Sure enough, you can't ask others about the details of Taoism in the books. Speaking these general Taoist words is what you are good at. Last time, Jingwei Guanli Muzhou was treated so well, but now Xian Wei is frightened when he meets a true Taoist priest. It was still hard to muster up the courage to say a few words. Of course, the main reason was that immortal Jia was present and sitting at the gate of the mountain, so the Taoist immortal did not worry about saying the wrong thing. However, when you do as the Romans do, you still have to treat people with sincerity. Xian Wei wanted to add a few more words while the iron was hot, but he couldn't think of a good way to say it for a while, so he hinted at the master of this art at the table, the Grand Master. Immortal Jia immediately understood that it was his duty to do his duty. He immediately followed up with a few sincere words, "The truth is such a big truth. Humans, of course, can't be vulgar, but they can't be totally unconventional. But really making these empty truths come true, as Taoist Master Xian Wei said, is like budding, blooming and bearing fruit, or making a sapling grow big and straight. One day, it is expected to reach the sky and be able to provide shade, care for neighbors and rest. To passers-by, it is up to us, the mountain masters, to explain the truth in detail." The Xian Wei was very impressed. This probably meant that an expert would know if someone was there as soon as he made a move. He was indeed a bit better than himself. Cui Qingxian put down the white bowl. Since immortal Jia is willing to treat people with sincerity, Pindao can't continue to use a fake identity. Pindo's real name is Kongshan, and the temple is called Cocoon House. Jiaxing asked, "Burning incense and sitting quietly, an empty mountain with only one person. A cocoon that binds itself." Cui Qingxian nodded and said, "Pindao once dug wells and refined elixirs in a small place called Chuanjiao Mountain. He practiced for many years. Unfortunately, I was not talented enough and the path to immortality missed me." The old Taoist priest slapped the gourd on his waist and said with a hearty smile, "I usually make some wine by myself, which is pretty good, but it's the poor Taoist who failed me in making the wine. The great Taoist misled me and I mistook the wine, so it's even." Jiaxing raised the bowl, replaced the wine with tea, and sighed, "Taoist priests walk on the road, live in the mountains when they meet, and stop the water when they meet, they are like gods." At the gate of the mountain, there were only 3 of them, and they were all Taoist priests. If you praised them, you could also praise yourself. Cui Qingxian, whose Taoist name is Kongshan, stood up. The thin old man put his piano bag on his back again and said with a smile, "It's funny to say that when I first entered the mountain to practice, I was young and frivolous. I didn't know the heights of the sky and the heights. I looked down upon all the Qigong practitioners in the world and only let 3 mountains and 1 person." The old Taoist priest continued to wander alone. Immortal Jia didn't take today's encounter too seriously, he just performed normally and at an average level. When Chen Pingan crossed the sea with his sword, landed on the land of Aquarius continent, and entered the territory of Beiyue, he asked Wei Shenjun to do a favor and return to Luopa Mountain in an instant. At the gate of the mountain, after hearing a rough idea from the mouth of immortal Jia, Chen Pingan smiled and said, "It seems that I missed a great person from this world." Jiaxing helped to correct a sentence, "If we miss each other, we will have something to spare." Sect Master Cui has sent a message with his sword, telling Sword Immortal Me not to forget to return to his sect on time. Over at Misiafeng, they are planning to open the Mirror Flowers and Water Moon. Everything is ready, only Chief Mi is missing. Jiang Shangzhen, who was a teacher in that village school, actually abducted several young men from neighboring villages to study in his own village school. He felt that his ability to teach students had surpassed that of Shanju Qin. In the Tiaoyu Mountain, Grand Master Wen, who slept hard every day, took a bath, changed his clothes, and then sat on a bench to bask in the sun, felt that he was okay again no matter if his skin was itchy. One day he actually asked Pei Qian, who only punched once a day, to raise his level to the limit. After Pei Qian was sure that Wen Qingqing was not joking, he punched him and a large hole appeared in the wall next to the martial arts arena. Before Wen carefully passed out, he vaguely heard Master Jing say, "Old rule, keep accounts, my brothers will get 20% off." The guy named Bai Xian often hangs out at the martial arts arena. After seeing this punch, he quickly picked up the purple clay pot and took a sip of wolfberry tea to calm down his shock. Jing Dafeng worked hard and swore several oaths before he had the chance to read the hero's book. After closing the book, Jing Dafeng said something fair, it was really a book of life and death. Bai Xian sat on the bamboo chair under the eaves, looking at the martial arts master who was said by Jing Dafeng to be weak in body but not weak in spirit. He only felt that this man was strong, and rare in this world. One day, the opportunity would come. When he matures, just wait until he breaks the cup as a trump card and beats Pei Qian together, Brother Wen can be the vanguard general. How did Wen Qingxin know about the doorway here, let alone the incident where he was registered in an unusual way? In the eyes of Master Jing, who saw through it without speaking out, he was just laying on the ground in a ghost gate. In any case, Bai Xian is a child with a strange personality. He is old-fashioned in his words and deeds, but he is the second member of the Luoshan mountain genealogy to recognize him besides Master Jing, so he usually sits in rows under the eaves together and warms up. I would like to chat with Bai Xian more carefully. Especially when he learned that Bai Xian, at such a young age, was already a secretive Dragon Gate realm swordsman, when Qingxin was even more willing to talk to him warmly, while Jing Dafeng held back his bad words and secretly Lihi. The two people who lived on Jiling Peak and just had nothing to do all day long were snitched by someone. They went to Mount Master Qin to complain and were driven to Tiaoyu Mountain. However, they did not go to the martial arts arena on the Yingyu Peak side of Tiaoyu Mountain to help. Instead, they went to Huaying Peak. Mi the Sword Immortal stabbed those few cultivators with flying swords, and Zhong Qian, a golden body martial artist, the 8 Qi refiners smashed their spells at the target. The girl in the mink hat, who seemed to be in the top spot and the chief master, was relatively satisfied, looking at the mess and excitement. However, they don't go to Huaying Peak very often, and there is no such thing as Jianmao. They fish for 3 days and dry the nets for 2 days. As long as no one urges them, they will definitely not go. Zhong Qian wanted to make the Gontang worshipper more effective, so she encouraged the old man to settle down at Huaying Peak, so that he would not have to run back and forth between Jumping Fish Mountain and the sword worship platform. The old deaf child laughed and said nothing. My name is Old Deaf, not an old fool. In addition to Fuyao foothills, Chen Pingon set up a cloud nest formation on Tiaoyu Mountain. Before that, it was obvious that Shanzhu Qin did not want Xiaomili to interact too much with this group of foreigners, strictly speaking, the anonymous outer disciples of Luopa Mountain. But perhaps because of a temporary change of mind, Master Chen suddenly figured something out, and Protector Zhou's mountain patrol business flourished. The guardians of Luola Mountain seemed to have more Fuyolu and Taoyushin, these two silent and mute-capable men. The little girl in black was wandering alone on the mountain patrol road. There was no one around, except for a green bamboo stick and a small carrying pole. She secretly put on the cloak that was tailor-made for her by the old chef and was just the right size. According to the method taught by the good mountain master, she first stood still, twisted the corner of the cloak with 2 fingers, and then swung it hard, swaggering, oh, 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 majestic and majestic. Between Yingyu Peak and Huaying Peak in Tiaoyu Mountain, there is a snow-white waterfall cascading down for more than 100 feet, and a stone bridge shaped like a rainbow. Millet grains wearing cloaks and satchels have to stop here every time, and occasionally meet with a certain colleague from Chilong Lane met here. Across a bridge, the two sides stood facing each other. The left guardian of Chilong Lane had been lying on the other side for a long time. The little girl in black looked solemn and nodded. When we meet on a narrow road, the brave wins. One runs wildly, the other rushes forward and then leaps high. There is no loser, everyone wins. After landing on the ground and standing still, the little girl in black turned around and clasped her fists. The world is far away, so let's say goodbye today and see you again tomorrow. In fact, it was Gu Kan, an outsider from Luoshan Mountain, who persuaded Chin Pingon to change his mind. Gu Kan said that you are too concerned about protecting Zhou Mili. Do you really need to be so careful? Did Zhou Mili have a protector before she met you in that dumb lake? If you are so cautious in your own poor mountain world, are you underestimating your own mountain guardians and offerings? Today, the little girl in black is still wearing a cloak, with her arms folded across her chest, holding a green bamboo staff and a golden pole. She is standing in the middle of the stone bridge. She raises her head and looks at the waterfall. He looked serious and frowned. It turned out that Sister Siago suggested yesterday that she reveal her true form, stay in the pool, and drink water with her mouth wide open. To be precise, she caught the waterfall to see if she could drink enough. Therefore, Zhou Mili thought carefully about whether this suggestion was feasible and whether it would be embarrassing or not if someone accidentally saw it. A warm hand pressed on his head. Zhou Mili tilted his head. Oh. It turned out to be the good mountain master. Chen Pingon told her his thoughts and reasons for setting up a cloud nest. Zhou Mili scratched his face and said, what did I think? It's such a big deal. Let's take a leisurely walk along the mountain road together. Chen Pingon borrowed the green bamboo stick, and the little girl in black carried a golden pole on her shoulders. The hiking pole poked against the bluestone slab, making a squeaking sound. Zhou Mili raised his palm and placed a pile of melon seeds. While chewing melon seeds, Chen Pingon complained, "It's not easy to practice Taoism, I'm busy with official affairs, and I owe a lot of debts to people and studies. There are so many things, big and small, both near and far. The old cook has a backlog of all kinds of letters on his desk. I am worried whether he will reply or how to write the reply." This is the first time for Shanju Chen, who is chatty and full of complaints, to tell others what is in his heart. One big and one small, they worked together and finished eating the melon seeds. They made empty fists of millet grains and handed them to Chen Pingon. Chen Pingon didn't know what was going on, but he still spread his palms and asked with a smile, "What?" Zhou Mili grinned and said, "I have saved a lot of happiness, so I borrowed some from the good mountain master." One unclenched his fist, the other clenched his fist. Chen Pingon shook his fist to show that he had received it, and asked with a smile, "Isn't it a gift?" Zhou Mili nodded vigorously, "I'm only borrowing, not giving away." Chen Pingon smiled and narrowed his eyes, "Don't we still have to calculate interest?" Zhou Mili shook his head and laughed, "It must be." Chen Pingon suddenly said, "Good deal." On the way when they came, under the sunlight, a rainbow hung over the waterfall. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.